Hey there, welcome to the Winx Forever podcast. I'm Lola, creator, host, and lifelong Winx fan. I'm taking a deep dive into the very cool universe of Winx Club. So whether you've been a Winx fan since 2004, like myself, or you vaguely remember it from your childhood, or even if you're being introduced to it for the first time, I want to say welcome. This is the Winx Forever podcast. Hello fairy friends, welcome back to our season 2 deep dive of Fate the Winx Saga here on the Winx Forever podcast. I am your host, Lola Valentine, and I am joined by my amazing guest co-host, Dane, aka JustDaneDane on TikTok, and this is our final Fate the Winx Saga rewatch episode for the Winx Forever podcast, and I am so emotional.
Yeah, it's a lot to take into because like this show's been out for a few years now, and then we started this project, and now it's like, oh, we're at the end of this now. So
yeah, it's really crazy. There's still a lot to look forward to in the Winx Club franchise moving forward after this, but like even for me, like this is really emotional because like I started the podcast when season 1 of Fate had just premiered on Netflix, and so it was my very first rewatch episodes for the podcast that I ever recorded. So it's really just, I don't know, it feels like full circle a little bit. Like it's crazy, but also I can't believe this is like the last episode that we ever will get of Fate the Winx Saga, which is also like a different level of sad.
right. And I think it's like it was so unexpected too, because I feel like a lot of us thought that there would be something else.
Yeah.
And there's not. So
Mm.
I still see it to this day on Twitter. People will be like, oh, like they canceled Fate? What? I've been waiting all this time. And I'm like,
Oh
oh.
no. Where have you been? Yeah, that's so sad. But we do have the graphic novels to look forward to, depending on when this episode airs, that might already be out, which is the first volume, Dark Destiny, and it is by Maverick Comics. So pick that up if you're interested to see what happens to our Winx sweet mates after this. But yeah, I guess let's freaking dive into this. But before we do, Dane, do you want to catch us up on what happened last episode before we embark on our final journey with our Fate Fairies?
Yeah, I would love to. So, like, a basic recap of last episode is that Bloom faced some like serious consequences for her actions after incinerating Rosalind. And like, when like you thought everything was just like going down the drain, they were able to like bring back the spirit of Miss Dowling, who like, yeah, said her goodbyes. And then they kind of planned like what their next moves were to go to war with the Blood Witches.
And that kind of sets us up perfectly for what's about to happen next. So here we go. Fate the Winx Saga Season 2, Episode 7, All the Wild Witches. The synopsis of this episode reads, as the Blood Witches enact their plans, it's up to the students of Althea to protect their school and their friends, while Bloom is faced with a painful choice to make. So, woo! Lots and lots of heavy things to tackle here, but starting with the breakdown of the scenes. So it opens with a shot of nightfall, and Silva is on the phone with Bhavani, who is in the Althea Castle, but she is there and everything's dark. Did the lights go? The lights had just gone off, right?
Yeah.
So we knew that. So yeah, light is power is out completely. Bhavani is talking about a possible like second mole who might have tipped off the Blood Witches to their attack. And as Bhavani is searching for Bloom, who is still like she broke out of her stasis prison in the headmistress's office, Scrapers slither into a random dorm as Musa and Flora head into the Winx suite, noticing that the door is like open. Meanwhile, a Blood Witch controls 2 specialist guards, one of whom is Luke, Dane's boyfriend. Well, situationship? I don't know if they're like...
Yeah, situationship, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They like each other, we know that. And we also see Bhavani and some random students being attacked by Scrapers as well, which I don't think that it ever occurred to me that Bhavani was a fairy. I thought she was just a specialist.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what surprised me too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's really crazy. But Flora enters the Wing Suite alone and is attacked by Sebastian searching for Bloom with Beatrix. So that's really sad. And he tells Beatrix to search the hall when she goes and lies to Sebastian about Flora being alone. Because she sees Musa hiding in the hallway and she whispers to Musa to go to get out of there. And then it just cuts to the intro, and that is the cold open that we get for this episode. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
talk about an opening too. Like I feel like
Ah,
when Beatrix tells her to go, like it was almost like watching a CW cliffhanger like before
yes.
like I was like we never get scenes like that in Fate. Like I feel like
Ah,
the CW vibe is like so specific and I feel like this was
yes.
like the first time and I guess they kind of did it pretty well. Like I can't say I didn't like it, but
Did the Vampire Diaries air on the CW or was it
yeah,
on?
TVD was on
Okay.
the CW, but like even
Yeah.
they were notorious for doing that. Like,
Yeah.
oh my
So it's
gosh.
just funny that we haven't gotten like that same vibe yet. Like until this last episode of Fate. Like what the heck, Brian?
Right.
Like what an
Or part of that is probably because of like streaming too. Like they don't have to like try to
yeah,
get the viewer to come back from like a commercial because you're
that's
just like
so
watching
true.
it.
That's so true.
But yeah,
But yeah, Bhavani like with the fairy like magic. I didn't
hmm
realize that at all
I didn't
until
either. What a surprise. Like the
yes.
blue tendrils as the scraper was sensing her magic. I was like, oh
Yes.
no,
These things are so gross too. Like
they
they
are.
captured we talked about it before, but like they captured like what a scraper in Winx Club made me feel.
Mhm.
Like to a T. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, and they
Disgusting.
like look worse too than like the animated series because like the animated series are very simplistic, but like if you were to take that and like turn it into like a real life creature, it would look
Mm-hmm.
kind of like this.
Oh yeah, for
Oh,
sure. So
nightmare
gross.
fuel. What else about this scene? Anything else? Oh, the flower girl taunt
Yes.
where they were like Beatrix was like, what did she say? Oh, the flower girl's all alone or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Like that's
Uh-huh.
like such a Winx Club thing. Like how they make fun of Flora for having this like natural power.
Yes, I know. I thought that was so funny. And like I love yeah, it feels very I don't want to say juvenile, but like Winx Club originally is a kid show. But
hmm
like it's funny that they would sprinkle that into like this drama series made for adults, basically. I
It
love
fits
it.
so well too.
It
Like I was just
does.
like, oh, I remember that.
Oh,
That's like a thing that used to happen all the time.
oh, I love it. Do you want to get
Um,
the next scene?
Yeah, I'll get the next scene. So the next morning, Bloom briefs like the remaining specialist unit on how the Blood Witches took over every other unit overnight. Silva says that the Blood Witches anticipated the invasion of their headquarters, and Riven kind of like mentions that they've used the last of the magic blocking antidotes. So after that, Bloom reveals fairies were also targeted by Sebastian's scrapers and shows Musa's footage of captives being imprisoned and drained under the school, even suggesting that Sebastian can't absorb all the stolen fairy magic at
Mm.
once. Silva plans like a covert strike with non-lethal weapons, emphasizing that they'll be fighting their own until the blood witches are neutralized, which will make it like easy for everyone to clear all the blood witches out and then free the fairies.
I thought it was funny when Bhavani was talking to Silva. She was trying to find Bloom before she got attacked by scrapers. Silva kind of hangs up and is like, Bloom's not dangerous. Still clearly on Bloom's side of the
Mm-hmm.
whole murdered Rosalind thing. And yeah, I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, like the way he like kind of jumped to her defense, and like also the way Bhavani was like basically
Don't
saying
be
she doesn't
so
really know
sure.
Bloom.
Yeah, that's so true.
The magic too, the fact that Sebastian can't absorb all of this fairy magic at once comes full circle. Honestly, throughout this episode, you'll see a little bit of that play into what happens. But yeah, that's a really important thing to note because if he could just absorb all this fairy magic at once, this episode would not unfold the way that it does.
That's so true. Oh my God. Yeah, that we'll get into that. That's gonna be crazy. So Kat and Tara exchange some distant glances while Aisha and Stella watch Misa's footage of Gray and a blood witch, another blood witch, because Gray's also a blood witch, carrying off of where he's reminding the blood witch that fairies are still people. So that was nice, of course. But Aisha says it's bad enough that he's a blood witch, but worse that he's also working for Sebastian, which, like, true. Tara, puzzled, suggests that maybe Sebastian is just very persuasive, while Stella, glancing at her unanswered texts to Beatrix, says that they just care about. Tara fidgets, expressing she knows they can't go in there because of the scrapers, but she's running out of patience knowing that Flora and Musa both are still trapped in there.
Yeah, pretty intense. Like you could see Tara
Mm,
like trying to be optimistic, but at the same time, she's over here like struggling because she knows that her
mm.
cousin's in there. And that makes sense as to why she's like trying to find a reason, saying, like, oh, well, maybe Sebastian's just like really persuasive. And then Stella's like, oh,
Yeah.
no, girl. I think maybe we just care about like some of the worst people sometimes. But also, when
Yeah.
she says that, if you pause and read Stella's text to Beatrix, after the Bhavani knows from last episode, it's just a chain of messages from Stella. And Stella even says, of course, you're working with Sebastian. I don't know why I ever expected more from you.
That's
I'm like,
so
right? I'm like, oh
sad.
my gosh, how heartbreaking. And it's the fact that she
Oh,
figured that out too. Like,
mhm.
good for her.
Yeah. Yeah, that was before Stella even
Mm.
saw her with. Well, I guess Musa told them, so that makes sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
About Beatrix. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would make sense.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, like, she hasn't seen Beatrix yet or talked to her, but Musa has. So,
Yeah.
and Musa's like still communicating with them.
Hmm.
Um, which begs the question, like, how cell service works in the other world,
Yeah, I'd like to
because
know too. Like,
like if all the power's down everywhere and like they can't communicate, like, and I don't know, it just, I'm questioning so many things, like why
mhm.
does like this mere mortal phone work? But anyway, I'll
The
digress for
sloppy
now.
technology
I
aspect.
know.
Oh my
I
gosh.
know. Oh my gosh.
So outside, Silva asks Bloom if she's ready for the fight, reassuring her that it's okay to say no. But Bloom stresses that she was previously the only one that could stop Sebastian, who wants the dragon flame, and that he claimed he wouldn't need to steal magic from fairies if she gave it to him. Silva warns giving him her power would make him even more dangerous and suggests that they fight together. Bloom then glances
Yeah.
over at a group of specialists and then immediately starts asking about Sky. And Silva explains his failed jailbreak, but reassures her that he's really resourceful. And then the scene cuts to baiting this guard into his cell by hiding from her up above in the riser
Mhm.
before dropping down from the ceiling and knocking her out and escaping.
I think it's funny that Bloom is just now asking about Sky. I don't know how long it's been since they left Farah and, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, I would assume, I was thinking like a day, but I guess maybe it's been like shorter, like hours, even, like not even like super long. Well, no, I guess it's the next day now.
Yeah,
And
it's just
she's
the
just
next
now
next
like,
day. Yeah.
oh, wait, where's my boyfriend?
Yeah, where's
Oh,
Sky? But I think that's also
oh,
telling too because she was starting to detach from Sky.
so, oh,
Yeah, there's
oh.
layers to it. It's sad. But
Hmm.
I thought it was so funny that like the moment she starts asking about Sky, Silva's like, whoa, 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 before you go nuclear, like he's really
That
resourceful.
is rude.
Whoa. It's a little, that's an interesting way to put it, especially considering the events of like 2 episodes ago. But it's true though. She's so like hot and cold sometimes.
Like, actual Bloom in
Yeah.
Winx Club, like for
Yeah.
real. Oh, it's crazy. But inside the cottage that they're like hiding out in the woods surrounding Althea, Aisha, Tara, and Stella express concern about Silva's plan for Bloom facing Sebastian alone. Despite their worries, Bloom is standing firm, stressing it's safer this way for everyone so that she can transform and defend herself against the scrapers, unlike the others. Upon briefly showcasing her power, after withdrawing it, she suddenly pales and briefly passes out, experiencing visions of a dark tower and Sebastian in front of what looks like a portal and a shadowy figure that we will learn more about in a little bit. But Silva helps her up and asks if she's ready, which Bloom insists she's prepared, agreeing to wait until they've neutralized the controlled specialists at Althea, the ones being controlled by the Blood Witches. Can we talk about
Oh,
I got the ick when she's like, y'all don't have this, and like does the
yes.
little dragon thing.
I
I
was
was
like,
like,
oh my
oh,
gosh. I was like, girl,
oh.
come on. What is this? But at the same time, I was thinking about what she was saying because, like, it was a lot to go through and, like, really understand the complexity of, like, why she would have to go alone. It
Mm-hmm.
makes sense because,
Mm-hmm.
like, in theory, she could transform. They don't have enough time to teach each other how to transform. And then the other girls would literally just get their magic taken in like a split second from a scraper, where she
Yep.
could fend them off, which actually
Pew
comes
pew.
back around too a little bit later because we
Ooh.
learn, well, I guess I can say it now. The scrapers would literally just vaporize if they try to take Bloom's power.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. And my God, I have a lot of. I don't know if you have thoughts about the same thing. Okay, I don't think you haven't said anything about it. Okay. So, something to point out that is very Winx Club coded. In season 3 of Winx Club, if you've never watched the show, welcome. This whole podcast is about it. In season 3 of Winx Club, Valtor takes control of Cloud Tower and makes the students of Cloud Tower into like this very like zombie state. Like he's controlling the
Yes.
witches. So like in this, he's controlling the school. He has the students captive and also controlling them to attack other people, just like in the series. And so I think that that was very clever of them to do to like lure out the main characters so that they have to go on in this like rescue mission mode to save their school and their friends. It's just like in season 3 of Winx Club with Valtor. And I thought that was just like so clever to
That
do
is really clever. I didn't even think about that because, like, that's so apparent in
that.
season 3 of Winx Club.
Attack of the Zombie
Yeah.
Witches.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So I thought it was cool. And Bloom, even, well, even the specialists like going in kind of, it's the same too. I think we talked about this last episode when they went to Sebastian's hideout. It was like
Hmm.
when the specialists went to Cloud Tower to save the witches and Valtor was like gone. Like he wasn't there anymore, but they got to save the witches. That's not how it's going to be in this episode, but
Oh
yeah.
no.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good observation though. Like, yeah, they definitely pulled that in. They had to have
Mhm.
because it's too
Similar.
but what a clever adaptation in that sense.
Oh,
Like
yes.
pulling
Yes.
that element in. Oh my gosh.
They do
Wow.
that a lot, and that's why I think not to stand on a moral high ground and be like, I'm a better Winx fan than everybody, because that's not how I feel at all. But it's just funny how a lot of more casual fans will say that it's not a good adaptation of the story, but for them to take liberties in a way that enhances it and fits it
Yeah.
to this world that they've created, like I think that they did. I think that is fairly clever. It
I think
is.
so too. I think that they pulled
Yeah.
from so many, they had so much to pull from too. And it's
Hmm.
very clear that they pulled from movies, different adaptations, and like even the comics and things like that.
Comics. Yeah.
So yeah, um, there's just a lot that goes into what this is. And also, I think a lot of people haven't watched the show in so long, like the
That's so
cartoon, that
true.
like, yeah, there's so much that is easily forgotten.
That's very
Um,
true.
even in
Oh,
Fate, they forgot the Celeria ring at one point, right?
no, they totally did. Just like in this show.
It's so funny. Like, I think we saw it once in the season, and that was it. But
Yeah.
like the fact that like in season one, they kind of hint that like when Stella can't activate her powers in the forest, that like it's because she doesn't have the ring, and
Right.
then we never see that again.
Yeah, that's so funny. You're listening to the Winx Forever podcast.
So at Althea, Sky sneaks around in a corner as a blood witch carries a drained fairy past Sebastian and Beatrix near like this office doorway. And Beatrix questions Sebastian's endgame, to which he like kind of deflects as like not part of their deal. And then she stoops back down to his level and is like emphasizing that her part of their deal is technically over. Like, we're gonna talk deals. Well, like
Mm-hmm.
here's ours. So he passes her a folded piece of notebook paper that just leaves her absolutely stunned. He then instructs a blood to continue searching for leverage and heads for the sanctum, ordering for another to drain in 20 minutes. As Beatrix veers into the office towards the ancient blood text, Sky discreetly slips away unnoticed.
Mm-hmm.
Leverage. Okay, like I did not catch that this was said here until I rewatched it. I thought that
Yes.
Beatrix came to that conclusion like just out of her own. So I was always like really confused, like how she jumped to that logic until I rewatched this, and then I was like, oh, she heard him say that. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then also, I
Oof.
really like how we see her eye the book, like with the way that they film it. Like they don't tell us what she's gonna do, but then we find out what she did, and I think that
Yeah.
that's just like that's what I love about this show, the
Telling.
tell. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
in the later seasons of the Winx Club, like that was such a problem, like the dialogue and just like
Well, they dumbed it down way like so much because it was airing on preschool channels in Italy
yeah.
and in the US. So like they had to. It was a different approach and a writing style than earlier seasons where
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have to dumb down their story or what was happening in any given scene just because I mean it was an older demographic that they were writing for. So like the fact that they brought that element back into it is just so nice and refreshing.
Right. It's like I can appreciate that like level of like storytelling, because like
Mhm.
there's something about somebody saying the same word 5 times in like the Nickelodeon dialogue, that I'm just like,
Oh,
oh, I can't stand that. Like, so
it's a lot.
yeah, I think we're good on this one.
Okay, cool. So, in the dungeons of Althea, which Althea has dungeons, that's scary to know, unconscious fairies lie near Flora and Nick. Remember Nick? Nick, the little asshole kid from the very first episode. Nick, who like teased Ivy and Devin at the bonfire and the like cold open of season two. Nick thinks that like danger might have passed, and Flora insists like they need to wait here for her friends, but obviously this little guy's just gonna ignore her advice, and he goes and he wanders off, revealing his fire magic after Flora specifically said, hey, just don't use your magic, these things are like attracted to magic. He's like, haha, watch me. So he does this little flame on thing only to get attacked by scrapers moments later, like we all knew was going to happen. Meanwhile, Musa is sneaking around the dungeon trying to find Flora. Oof,
What
crazy.
an interesting parallel, because like if you think about it, he creates this false sense of panic in that first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, there actually was real danger at some point, but then he comes back for this last episode, and then his impulsiveness, we find out he's a fire fairy, so it's like, well, that explains his fiery behavior in the first episode. And then like, yeah, just the way he like, Flora's telling him like, come back to the light, like get back in the
Mm-hmm.
light, and he is just ignoring her, walks off drained. Like, should have
Uh,
listened. So
yeah, no, obviously. Oh my gosh, it's so gross. Like, I think
yeah,
that his addition to, like you said, to kind of like full circle moment, like it was very funny
I
because
think
we were
so
all like,
too.
oh yeah, this guy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then he gets attacked by scrapers like, oh.
Oh, your own fault. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
like
yikes.
everyone kind of was like not wishing for it, but like they all knew something was gonna happen
Mhm.
to this idiot. Like that's just so
Yeah,
funny.
it's so funny too. Like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Like now that I'm thinking about it, because like he comes off as like that pompous type that like would screw up like this. So
Yes.
he's so brief, but yeah, it's there. So I think it's cool
Right.
too that they like show us a little bit more of the background characters in comparison to the main ensemble,
Yeah.
because it gives us like a little bit more perspective on like kind of like what makes I would say even this group like so unique that like we focus on in this series compared to like focusing on like some of the random like background fairies or whatnot.
Hmm. Yeah, totally.
Outside, Silva leads the specialist through a forest trail that's parallel to Althea, while Riven uses his binoculars to assess that the Blood Witches are protecting themselves by using controlled specialists to patrol the school. If you remember from a previous episode, we learned that Blood Witches can control people's bodies from miles away, or at least they used to. And the school didn't realize that they could still do that, or some of
Mhm.
them were learning how to do that. So Silva emphasizes their advantage being secrecy, so they spread out silently, scaling the walls. And then Riven takes out a sentry specialist, and then everybody starts to move out, right? But we know from Sebastian remote viewing kind of into Andreas and controlling him that he could see what was going on.
Mhm.
So I wonder if that's what tipped the Blood Witches off originally for these next
Ooh.
few scenes, because
Yeah.
Riven did take out a sentry specialist that was being controlled. He didn't take out a normal Blood Witch.
Right.
So
That makes sense. It makes sense that like yeah, why did they not think about that?
yeah,
And even later on when they control a certain specialist to get another character to come into their trap, it just makes sense.
I guess they didn't have a
Like,
choice either way,
I
but like,
guess
yeah. So that right there does throw like a fork in the plan, I guess, just ever
hmm
so slightly.
if
Um,
this little mission felt forced, it didn't feel
yeah,
like they needed this little recon mission that they were doing. Like, was this like when they wanted to go like ambush everybody
the point
and
of the
get
mission was to clear the path for Bloom to get into the school.
okay. So it did have a purpose. I remember. You're right. But still, like from a storytelling standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like the only thing that was accomplished here was, well, we'll get to it. Oh wait, okay,
It
it's
unfolds,
further down.
but
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
know what you mean. Like, oh my gosh.
yeah.
But
Ugh.
at the cottage, Bloom puts Musa on speakerphone and she warns that the Blood Witches may have somehow already caught wind of their plan. Witnessing from the window of the suite, she sees a ton of controlled specialists leaving the school. And Stella warns that Silva won't be able to clear a path for Bloom to reach Sebastian at that point because there's way
hmm
too many of them and they're onto what they're doing too.
Totally.
At the same time, Tara stresses over Flora's magic and suggests like seeking help from Gray or maybe Beatrix. And Aisha's over there like doubting Gray. And Musa is like kind of confirming at that moment on the phone that Beatrix is left. So Musa like takes it into her own hands to like say she's got an idea, and she grabs the sparring stick and leaves the suite. At this moment, Tara's like so frustrated that she like kind of like can't really regulate herself. And so she storms off. Stella follows her, prompting Aisha to question Bloom about her drawing and says that like it relates to this like vision or premonition she had that she thinks is tied to her magic. Aisha's over there comforting Bloom, like urging her that accepting help is not a sign of weakness and that like drawing from her experiences that she's had with Gray, like she's able to like use that to emphasize that they're all in this together and that like it's okay to accept help from others around you. So I thought that was like
hmm
really sweet. But this affirmation too, like this togetherness that like Aisha brings to the group, especially throughout the season, like is affirmed later in this episode when it's like really needed too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But then it flashes back to Dane and Riven confronting Luke, who obviously is controlled by these blood witches. And when they kind of like start losing in their fight, Sky does appear and helps them out, knocking out Luke. And then they decide that, yeah, they can't take all of these blood witches on with the controlled specialists at this moment. And so they retreat. But yeah, so this is
Yeah.
what I was gonna say. Like, it felt like this was the only thing that we got out of this was, like, I guess we got like Sky reunited with the people outside of Althea too, but like also like the Luke thing. Like, he was such a like a minute character that like didn't really
hmm
matter, and like they just like bring him back to camp, and like that's just so funny to me that like that's all we got out of the scene, really.
Yeah, I think we
With
also
their
got like a little bit more for Dane too, like because
That's true.
when he showed up with Riven, he's saying that he texted Luke to like meet them there. And it's just like, why would you do that? Like you were literally told to like
It's
be
so dumb.
quiet. But I think it's also like part of his character too, the like ego. He was like the shy kid who turned like a little cocky and like became like I would say he's like one of the strongest specialists at
Yeah.
Althea. And
Yeah.
so I just thought it was funny because Riven's like, what the fuck? Like, why would you do that? And then, they immediately see like what the situation is as he like draws his sword and it's just chaos. So I like
That's
this
so
fight
true.
sequence too. Yeah.
Yeah, the fight sequence was good. I feel like all of the choreography in this season was just like another level.
Solid.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really good.
My only gripe with the fight scenes is that you can tell that they filmed so much more than they actually put into the show. Like they film these big sequences and they like cut them down to maybe these brief moments. So it didn't really feel like the classic Winx Club where there's a huge fight going on and we see all these
Where
different angles.
and
Like,
it takes like 3 episodes for
yeah,
them to even like get through one battle because like yes.
yeah.
So exhausting.
And like the battlefield isn't really the focus either.
It's
It's not,
true. Yeah.
yeah, like I think in the classic like Winx Club too, like you really see everything go down at Althea for the most part. And here it's like, I guess we're on campus, but the campus is so big that like there's all these little fires going on everywhere that
Yes.
it's like, it's just a little bit more scattered. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
then we get that shot in the cell where Flora like grabs a pen from a knocked out fairy and then like offers herself up to the blood witches. She's like, oh, I always hated getting picked last. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is this girl's resourceful. Like,
I also hated that line that she used. I was like, why did they tell her to say that? Like, it didn't land like she thought it was gonna land. Like, it just felt forced. I was just like,
right.
ooh. Like, I love Paulina and I love this version of Flora, but
Mhm.
that was not Flora. I don't know who that was.
Also, maybe that was just Flora like manipulating the situation too. Because if you think
Yeah,
about
that's
it, like
true. Yeah.
she was the cool girl. Like Flora,
Hmm.
from what we know in Fate and like who she was, like she has like this cool vibe to her, unless she wasn't back
Hmm.
then. I don't know. But like always hated getting picked last. Who would pick you last? Like
Yeah, yeah, no, for real. That's so true. Good
maybe she
note, though.
was, yeah, maybe she was just manipulating them. But yeah, next scene. Oh, this
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Sky, Riven, and Dane like regroup with Silva and others in the graveyard, and Silva recognizes Sky using his father's sword, and they banter about Andreas kind of shaming it out of jealousy. They share a heartfelt moment before Silva says that they have to wait for the Solarians. Then Riven mentions Musa and Flora are still inside, but Silva insists that Sky returns to the groundskeeper's house as he lacks a Blood Witch antidote to block their magic mind control, and they're
Hmm.
crawling all over the school. When they enter the graveyard and Silva sees Sky show up after breaking out of prison because he knew he could fend for himself, he's like, glad that you could finally join us. And
Yeah, yeah.
Sky's like, oh yeah, I had to take care of some delinquents. And you just see Riven and Dane dragging Luke in the background. This
They
is
are
like,
said delinquents.
yes, yes, they are. Like, it's so like organic leadership vibes. Like that's like what I get
Mm.
from this version of Sky compared to like Winx Club Sky, where it's like, oh, he's the leader because, well, he's the leader,
Yeah,
like,
right.
yeah. Like I feel like here it's more like he's not necessarily like I don't think he's ever established as the leader of the specialists. He's
Right.
just like in a leadership role. So
Yeah. I think that in season one, they set him up that way really well by like establishing who he was as a character in season one,
mhm.
and then it just organically leading like his choices in season two as well. I think that that's been cool to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In a hallway back at Althea, though, Musa beats up a blood witch with her like staff, her bow staff, and then notices another with a knife to Flora's neck. The blood witch who is carrying Flora to go, I guess, get drained by Sebastian. Flora stabs this guy with the pin that she took from one of the drained fairies, giving time to knock him out with her little stick. Then pulls Flora aside as a group of blood witches pass by.
Yeah,
Man.
so I thought that like this was a really resourceful moment. Like it's a good moment too because Muse is a mind fairy, and part of that is also being resourceful and on your toes. And she thought of like obviously these girls didn't know what to do to
Mm-hmm.
save Flora, and she like takes matters into her own hands. She already knows where everything is, where people are going, and she camps outside the sanctum because she knows that eventually they're going to have to bring Flora up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I love that. I just love the way that this little moment kind of unfolded. So,
And I love too what you pointed out that she's a mind fairy, so of course she's resourceful in this way because all of her friends can only think about how they can help with magic. Well, they
mhm.
can't help with magic right now because scrapers will clock them immediately. So, Musa being a mind fairy with no powers right now, like that's basically a mind fairy anyway, because mind
Yeah,
fairies
because
don't have the same kind of like pew pew power, but like
mhm.
they are powerful in other ways. But she's always had to kind of be this resourceful just because of the nature of her powers, which I thought, yeah, that's such a good
Yeah,
note. Oh my
it's like
gosh.
it's like a really interesting way to think about it too, because there's like a psychological aspect that if you remove magic from the equation,
Yes.
all these girls lost their powers immediately. Who they are as people and the way that they think and like the way that they operate is very much influenced by the power that they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. It's like in season one when they lose their powers and have to clean the school.
yes.
And Techno's like, "What's a broom? What's
Oh
a
yeah, this
bucket?"
bucket goes on my head. I know what this is. Like, oh my gosh.
Ah, that's so funny. Ah. But meanwhile, at the cottage, Bloom sketches her premonition, still just like sketching it, the portal that she saw in her vision, before answering a call from Sky, which I'll make a comment about this in a minute. She assures him that Musa and Flora are safe, but senses something is wrong. Sky, of course, being controlled by Sebastian. The camera pans and we can see Sky is in this trance state. Um, and he's just on the phone talking to Bloom. When Sebastian takes the phone and instructs Bloom to go outside quietly, implying he wants the dragon flame, he warns that if she speaks to anyone or if anything happens to Gray, who is waiting for her outside, this guy will die. He's just gonna kill him. And he tells her to drop her phone and to walk away with Gray. And I have a lot of beef with this transitional scene. Sky was just talking to Silva. How the freak did he get back to Althea under the control of freaking or was he controlled by Sebastian the whole time?
Yeah, like was he controlled when he
Even
went over
even
to the
talking to yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's a tough one because we never really get a direct answer on that. I would assume it's because he's like Sky. Like obviously he loves Bloom and he's gonna do whatever he can for Bloom, kind of like in the same way that Bloom would for Sky. But yeah, I don't
But
know.
I but I also feel like it might be due to like scenes getting cut out. Like
Too, there has to be
it,
something we didn't see. I wouldn't be
yes, it felt
surprised if
like
there were like moments here.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like it felt like there was, and this whole episode kind of felt like that to me. It felt like very choppy. It felt like there was a lot missing that was
Yeah.
supposed to be there. And it's really sad because, well, I'll save that. I'll save it for later on in the episode. But it's just, yeah, that happens a lot in this episode. And that's like one of my core beefs with this final, like this series finale, essentially. That was not supposed to be the series finale, but here we are.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah, I did like the way that they filmed it though. Like when Bloom's on the phone and she's like sensing that something is wrong. Like when Bloom was talking about being scared that she could sense that things weren't over or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that was something that was said in like season 3 of Winx Club and like when they defeated
Yes,
Valtor.
yes, the faux
Hmm.
defeat of Valtor.
And she got the
Oh
feeling that things were not over,
my
you know.
gosh.
But it's the fact that like she's just like very, I would say she's observant, but like not all the time. But
Yeah.
like,
I
yeah.
think that it's might be too like part of her power. I don't think they never like made the connection between Valtor and Bloom's powers and fate like they did in Winx Club. But
Hmm.
I do think that because that's, kind of like what it was in Winx Club of like Bloom feeling the connection still there.
Yeah, yeah.
But for, I don't know, for this version of Bloom, I wonder if it was just like the ancient power in her kind of like cluing her into like, no, like it's about to go down and like you're not even ready.
Yeah, yeah.
It felt like some kind of like ancient knowing, not like in like the original Winx Club, but yeah, super weird.
Which I guess, yeah, the weird timeline thing about the destruction of Bloom's home realm kind of goes down, like that time gap versus the age of the characters like Valtor and things like that.
Hmm.
So, granted, Valtor was trapped in ice in the cartoon, so like
Exactly.
we don't know how long he was there. He could have been down there for like thousands of years.
Well, in the series, he says Butler 17 years.
Oh, he does. Yeah, you're right. Okay,
Which
now I
is
remember. Yeah.
annoying because I don't buy that. Like
So
it
what about the
makes
time portal? These plot
yeah,
holes.
exactly.
They fixed that here though. That's not anywhere to be
Which is
found in the show.
great.
So
Yes.
thank gosh. Like talk about a plot
Yeah,
hole.
so true.
But I like the way they filmed this because like the kind of they're having like a seemingly normal conversation, but you can also sense that something is up as the viewer, like as she's talking to him on the phone. Like I was not convinced the moment she picked up that phone and was like talking to Sky all of a sudden. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, I was like, why is he calling her? Just like go into the cottage and see her.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you're
exactly.
all
Yeah.
standing out there anyway.
So, but they did that thing that they did in the previous episode where like Gray had controlled Luke and it was like the jaw
Hmm.
dropping, like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, he's under Blood Witch mind control kind of moment. And I
Yeah.
like that. I think it's like really cool how they like incorporated that because it gives you like a little bit of like wake up, like stuff's going down, plot
Yeah.
twists.
Yeah.
So, and that's just
Ugh.
Sebastian. He's full of plot twists. I think it's like part of his like comedy as a character. Like he loves the idea of doing this kind of thing to like the
He's
people
like,
he's
and
working
then I'm
against.
gonna say this, and everyone's gonna be like, what? That's what he is saying to like all of his little blood witch like minions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But it's so true.
Back in the wing suite, though, Flora brews a potion from various herbs, asking Musa to search for a hidden stash inside Flora's suite somewhere while concealing the full extent of her plan of what she's doing. But Musa's super skeptical of this, and she questions Flora's secrecy and suggests even just asking Tara directly. But Flora insists that she has everything under control and doesn't want to distract the others. Such a bullshit excuse, girl. You know exactly
Hmm.
what you're doing.
Hmm.
As Musa warns about Tara's pushiness, she discovers that Bloom and Sky are missing, and we briefly see Gray leading Bloom down through the guarded greenhouse and the medical
Yeah.
bay. I didn't catch like what Flora's plan was on the first watch. I don't know if you did either.
But at this point,
But on the rewatch, it's like because you see everything in like detail, you're like, oh my gosh, wait a second. And you know what's gonna happen too.
yeah.
It's like a completely different show when you watch it a second time.
Oh,
I
totally.
swear.
I agree. Oh my gosh. I know. And poor Musa is just like so eager to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's just so like, yeah, like anything, like what are you doing? Like let me help you. And
Yeah.
Flora's like, I've got it. Just like go find these ingredients and like, cause she knows what the frick she's about to do, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just scary a
But
little
also,
bit.
I like
Like,
that, like, we've established that Flora is a free spirit already, and that's very much reflected in what she is doing right now. And I think that
mm-hmm,
that's like, I just love that. I love the consistency in the characters. Like, I feel like when I watched it for the first time, I didn't really notice that as much. But like
mm-hmm.
the second time around, I'm like, okay, wait a second. Like, no, these characters have these very clear motivations based on like who they are. And I think that this is a great
Yeah,
example of that.
absolutely. Oh my gosh. Meanwhile, in the forest, Stella encounters Beatrix while searching for Bloom, and Beatrix reveals that she stole the Blood Witch text and details Sebastian's plans to raise Shadow, this shadowy figure that Bloom saw in her vision from the realm of darkness to resurrect the dead from Asterdell. Beatrix also explains Sebastian needs the dragon flame in order to open this portal, this conduit, and urges Stella to tell Bloom to sit tight when Stella reveals that actually Bloom and Sky are missing. And Beatrix concludes that Sebastian is using Sky as leverage, stressing that once it opens, the conduit can only be closed from the other frickin' side of it. So that's great. They share a tense exchange about Beatrix's betrayal, where Beatrix admits that she made a deal with Sebastian for information about her past. Very similar, not unlike Bloom a couple of episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, revealing she has two sisters and feels utterly alone when Stella, feeling betrayed, just tells Beatrix she once had her before just excusing herself to search for her friends, leaving Beatrix alone again. And it's just when
This
Stella
whole
said that,
scene.
when
Yeah.
she said, "You had me," like, fuck,
And then
that
she's
is
like, right?
hard.
And then she's like,
Ugh,
now if you'd excuse me, I have to go back to searching for my friends. Like,
my friends.
oh no. And then like this is such a parallel to when Stella kind of like shut Beatrix out the last few times
Yeah, from the
too.
party and like,
Mm-hmm.
the mailbox, like all of it. Like it's sad that like Stella said, "Well, you had me," when really she didn't see all the times that she wasn't there for Beatrix when she should
Mm-hmm.
have been. Otherwise, I think
Yeah.
that this would have unfolded a lot differently.
And I
Like,
think that's like the human aspect of this. It's like showing
yeah.
that like it's kind of a play on both sides of like how these people misstep in their communication, which like leads to
Hmm.
this. And it's so
And they
sad.
both
Like,
have different interpretations of what their relationship was a little bit too.
yeah, for
You know?
sure. So
Ah,
it's just heartbreaking, like all around. Like, I think the social complexities of how information like really does travel through these characters is one that is like, I don't know how they webbed this out in the writer's room, but like I cannot wrap my head around that, yet alone, like if they have to start cutting things, how do you like account for that?
dude, you have to
That
be
is
like,
intense.
yeah. I think that's why it feel like in parts it does feel so like discombobulated because
Mm-hmm.
it's meticulous. Like when you already have these threads being woven between characters and then you start cutting things out like that, like they get broken. And so it is hard if you do not take meticulous notes about what you removed, what you added. Like, dang, it's just like, and for them cutting out so much content that it was a whole episode short, like that's a lot. That is a lot of
Yeah,
stuff to keep track of. So, oof, I don't know. I don't envy the people that had to do all that cutting because that is a headache. Like,
but
gosh.
this scene was just so sad though. The setup of this, like, I think this is like the saddest. I don't want to say it's the saddest moment that have seen in the Winx universe, but it's multiverse, I guess
Mhm.
that's a better way to put it. But like it really hit me. Like every time I see this, like I get goosebumps. I cried at this scene. I've cried at this scene
Yes.
multiple times. I cried when I rewatched it. Like
Mhm.
it's just so
Same.
heartbreaking to see these girls like kind of talk about what's going on in such a tense moment, and like it's this life or death mixed with just these relationship dynamics that are going on. I don't know. It's just it's too much. And also the music. We have to talk about the soundtrack at the very end of this because that's like the soundtrack that we hear
Or
kind of
like a
like maybe
tag.
almost like a prequel ish.
Ooh, yeah.
The soundtrack does match up with when Bloom first gets her powers. And then we hear it like in this episode right here. But we're also going to hear this soundtrack at the very end of the episode. Like we've heard this soundtrack before because it's already been played a little bit during the fire versus water scene. Like when she first lights up her powers, we
Hmm.
hear this. And then we hear it here where it's in more of like a sad context. And then we're
Yeah.
going to hear it later in the episode. So it's like, the versatility with how things can be directed here is like in
With
terms of the
music.
music.
Oh, that's so true. And yeah, because it feels familiar but like new at the same time.
They
It's
changed
so
part of it
good.
too for this scene, which
Yeah.
I love, but at the same time, like, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's great.
Inside Althea, Gray leads Bloom down a corridor.
I know.
Inside Althea, Gray leads Bloom down a corridor. Bloom urges Gray to do the right thing, who is, or noting that Bloom could have given Sebastian the dragon flame weeks ago. Bloom accuses Sebastian of stealing magic from fairies, while Gray counters by blaming fairies for killing blood witches at Aster Dell, including some of his family. Bloom confronts Gray for betraying Aisha, but they enter the interior courtyard or the everything room before she can finish. There Sebastian excuses and reveals by magical vines like up on the riser, and he demands the dragon flame from Bloom. Kind of like hastily, Bloom agrees and channels her magic into the convergence crystal Sebastian's holding, promising to free Sky once he has the dragon flame.
Mm.
Really is the area though. Like you said last episode,
Yes.
Lola, he brings up that I'm just saying this is complicated. He talks about how this is a lot bigger than just black and white battle without
Oh.
saying that directly. He just says, I'm just saying this is complicated. So yeah, I think that's really telling here too that there's so much going on with this fairies versus blood wishes thing. Like,
Yeah, so much. More than like both Bloom and Gray and like any of the people currently fighting this battle. Like this battle has been going on for centuries, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
ugh, it's heavy. It's a lot. Something to note, I haven't watched the ending of season 3 of Winx Club in a long time. But it's crazy to me that going back to like how many things Fate actually did pull from the original Winx series, Valtor in the final episode of Winx Club season 3 uses like capturing the specialists to his advantage to lure Bloom into a final battle and the Winx Club into a final battle. So it's crazy that Sky is getting used here in the same exact freaking way. Like, oh my god, like it's
Getting used as
perfect.
bait.
That's unappealing bait. How sad.
Oh my gosh. But also Sebastian does reveal, like tying back into what I said earlier in the episode, he reveals that the scrapers would fry if they tried to absorb the dragon flame. So that makes me think back to episode 3 though, when he was trying to get the dragon flame from Bloom. Was he really trying to get it from Bloom? Or was he trying to get like the powers from maybe Aisha and Flora? So
Ooh.
I don't know, because he like I know he sent them down there to absorb their power anyways, but like how could he have gotten the dragon flame from Bloom if it would have just fried the
Mm-hmm.
scraper?
Mm-hmm.
Could be a plot hole. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's fair.
something to think about.
Mm.
Yeah, because he wanted to send Bloom down there.
Yeah,
So like,
and
was he
then
really gonna use the scraper to drain her down there, or was he gonna do something else?
he might have learned that information once he saw like how powerful Bloom's like dragon flame was when she like vaporized
Hmm.
Rosalind. He might have like or
Okay.
maybe like he had other complications with other fairies, magic, like with scrapers, not even just like other powerful fairies. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one to like really grasp.
Yeah. Because it
Yeah.
could be like a
We
glaring
have
plot
no
hole,
answer.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
But
we can what we want, but
um Aisha, Stella, and Tara confront Silva in the graveyard, arguing against his plan to wait for the Solarians. Silva claims they're outnumbered, but Tara passionately argues that they must fight to save their friends, citing the bravery of others like Bloom and Musa, while also claiming it's what Miss Dowling would have wanted. Inspired by Tara's determination, Silva agrees to fight alongside them under the terms that they don't use magic until they clear the scrapers, rallying the specialists to gear up for battle.
it was good. I wish it was better for me personally. I think it really is the choppiness of this episode that pulls me out of the story for
Mm-hmm.
me. I wish that I liked the scene more
Yeah.
because even rewatching it, I'm just like, I don't know. It just feels forced. It feels like if we had more connections, more threads were not cut out, it would have felt stronger to me. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Feel that I got chills from the scene for sure, especially when she was like, that's what Dowling would have wanted. And you kind of hear this harp in the background and whatnot, and everybody's smiling at each other. I'm like, this is so classic Winx Club,
Oh,
this
that's
kind
so
of
true.
moment. But I think it's such a shift though from season one, and that's what took me out, is that season one Dowling gives this a little bit more cinematic high stakes speech. I feel like in general things seemed a little bit more dark high stakes in season one, and then here it's a little bit more like teen drama, casually filmed, shaky cameras.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I like the scene. Could have been better though, I totally agree.
It just Tara being like the constant voice of reason, I think too. Like between her and Aisha, like why is a kid telling this adult like which like they've done this the whole series like
Mm-hmm.
kids pretty much run the school, the adults do not.
They're not in
Which
charge.
I know
Like,
they're not in charge for sure. And it's just funny like yeah, I don't know. I wish rewatching this honestly, this episode specifically, a lot of things fell flat for me, and I wish that they hadn't. I mean, I still got emotional in the same parts that I got emotional like when I first watched it. I don't think that I've rewatched the last episode of Fate in a very long time. I think that I've only watched this maybe twice before rewatching it for us recording tonight. I think that I've avoided it because it just hurts so bad. It just hurts
yeah.
knowing that this is the last episode. But too, like I don't know. Rewatching it this time was just hard for me. Like in a different way than it's the last one. We're never gonna get it again. In a way of like, oh, like some of the decisions that were made, I'm just like, ah,
Yeah, you see it and you're like, that's how they're gonna end it on like a note
I
like
know.
this. But also like
Yeah.
the editing was like kind of choppy in parts, and
Yeah, it's just
yeah, certain
hard.
decisions were, yeah, that's how I feel too about like a lot
Mhm.
of, we'll get into more of it, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
yeah, definitely like one of my least favorite episodes. So
Yeah, which is so sad because it's the last one we freaking get. Like,
yeah.
what? Oh my God. Yeah. Jeez. So, yeah, I do like when Silva though says, "Well, who am I to argue with Farah?" And it's
Sweet.
cute because like he didn't get to say like his final goodbyes to Farah like everyone else did, and it's just sad because he loved her.
Yes. That's
Ah,
another thing we don't really get much closure on in this season. Like
yeah.
kind of what Silva and Farah like had going on as like friends. Like there's not a lot of
Mhm.
like, you don't really see anything that like really covers that after the end of season one. So
Yeah, it's really sad. I hate it. I hate fate for that. Why?
yeah.
Why? Why? Ugh, so sad. You're listening to the Winx Forever podcast. If you're enjoying this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, be sure to follow the show on your preferred streaming platform so that you're notified when new episodes are dropped. While they're like gearing up to head out to this like final battle, basically, Dane is tending to an unconscious Luke. The fact that this boy is still unconscious is very like alarming. No one else seems to be alarmed by it, but I'm concerned for this man. Um, But Dane is encouraged by Riven to stay behind to avoid alerting the Blood Witches. What? Really?
Uh, yeah, I think it was he encouraged him to like in case he wakes up again and like he doesn't know where he
Duh.
is or he's like under the control of the Blood Witches.
Yes, that's fair. Okay, that makes sense. Dane tends to an unconscious Luke, encouraged by Riven to stay behind to avoid alerting the other Blood Witches, while Kat hands Riven a sword before joining Tara, who awkwardly rambles on about a TED talk on empowerment and how, like, she used that in her speech or whatever, and Kat found Tara's nervousness endearing, and they share a kiss before Kat eagerly says it's time to go fuck some shit up, quote unquote. Silva then leads the antidote equipped specialists into battle against the Blood Witch controlled specialists at Althea's grounds. Okay, so this is the moment that I was like, this feels forced because we didn't get all of the background,
Mm-hmm.
everything that was supposed to happen between Kat and Tara's relationship. Like, girl gives you snails and automatically you're like hooked. I don't think so. Like, there was more that we missed out on, and we know that. Like, we know that. Not everyone knows that. And so, like, we're just watching this again. I was like, this, like, it was sweet, but like, it also gave me the ick because I'm like, that was awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I got
it
back with my
wasn't,
girlfriend, but I'm gonna kiss you
but I'm gonna
anyways.
come, like, yeah, like, it doesn't, I don't know. You're an Avatar fan, right?
Last Airbender, yeah, I've seen some of
Uh,
Airbender.
Okay, so wait, you've seen
I
some?
have not watched the entire series.
You would love that show.
I know.
Dang! Okay, well, for our listeners who might get this reference, it felt like Aang kissing Katara right before like the Day of Black Sun. Like it just felt like this, like you're gonna do this now. Like
This is
this is
not the
what you
time for
choose to
this.
do
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now. Yeah, like so yeah, it was just annoying. Like I love it for Tara, love that for her, but
Mm-hmm.
like my girl needs a win.
Yeah.
But like, what are we doing right now, guys? Yeah, that's how I felt about that. How did you feel about it?
I think like reviewing season one and like knowing that they kind of like planted that seed with Kat and Tara ever so briefly, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course all the other stuff that we didn't get to see for Kat, it it wasn't like unexpected because like I'm pretty sure Kat had like this incident of like an issue at a party where she punched somebody and then kissed another girl, or there was something
Mm-hmm.
like that that did not make it into the final edit. So maybe it's not so out of character from
Right.
knowing that, but also it wasn't in the final edit. So
It's
like,
hard.
yeah, it's hard to tell. Like,
Yeah.
she's just one of those characters where she was written to be bigger than she was. And then because of that, like, it does impact things a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But
Uh,
I liked the scene. I thought it was cute. Like Tara's little
yeah.
rambling and all that. I'm like, oh my gosh. But
Terry is
also
cute. Yeah.
TED Talks in the other world, girl. Like, what do you mean? Like,
Oh, I know.
yeah.
That's so funny.
Um,
Ugh.
Back in the Winx suite, Musa and Flora run out of solvent and are short on time. Musa calls Tara, who asks for an update on the situation as she heads towards the school with Aisha and Stella. Flora explains that she still needs more solvent to distill a pheromone of her magic that will attract the scrapers to her, revealing that Eldwin amalgam is also toxic to scrapers. Tara is reluctant to let Flora risk herself, but she eventually gives in and lists alternate solvents that they can use. Flora thinks determined to proceed with her plan to help save everybody, who we briefly see fighting on campus for a moment too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, something that we should probably note too. Speaking of, before the scene happened, there was a battle charge. Do you
Oh
remember
yeah.
where they all line
Yes.
up and start running? So sloppy. I cannot believe that they filmed that like that. Like,
No.
I'm just like, this is just a bunch of specialists running in a straight line. The camera
Not
didn't even
cinematic
look,
at all.
yeah, no, it was so
Mhm.
flat. It was not cinematography, it was at that point.
Crying.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
And granted, we see a lot more like of that videography style in this season, but like for that shot,
Yeah,
come on,
that was
like
not it. I was expecting like the armies of Mordor and like Aragorn, like it is
could have
not
been,
this day.
yeah.
Like it could have been so it could have been like so epic. And then I think because they were banking on leaving us on a cliffhanger and then trying to force Netflix's hand of giving them a third season with the
Hmm.
cliffhanger, but Netflix doesn't give a fuck. They
There
don't
were
care. Like they do not care about your cliffhanger. So I felt like they were not worried about making it like this grand finale that could have been so epic, but it just feels flat. Like all the way around for me.
yeah.
It's disappointing. Ugh.
Um, when Flora did say earlier in the season that she was studying the scrapers, so
Mm-hmm.
like I think it's interesting that she's probably been holding on to some information about them for quite a while now. Also, like Tara's growth here, realizing that she has to let Flora do her thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is her home now too. It only makes sense that she would not pull what she pulled back in the third episode, or I think it was the third or fourth episode.
Mm. The
Fourth
fourth.
episode. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it makes sense that she wouldn't pull what she pulled in the fourth episode, where she was like kind of like getting in between her and Riven.
Taking a step back. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
it's
love that.
nice to see that level of growth from her, but like also when she's like explaining where all the different solid options are in the suite.
I love that because the other girls are looking at her like,
How do you
excuse me?
know this? Like,
Yeah.
she's like, oh, I'm just very observant.
I
Also,
thought that was
clocking
so cute.
locking Aisha's bottle of vodka in the bottom drawer, and like you just see Aisha glaring at her in this moment. Granted, she should be able to drink at this point because the things that these
Yeah.
girls do, like, I mean, well, no, she probably legally should not be able to drink, but like in the context of like, I don't blame her for drinking being around this much chaos all the
Oh,
time.
yeah. No, totally.
Like,
Especially because, like, Aisha's a very, like, calm and composed, like, character in this,
yeah,
like, even in the Winx Club series. But just a little something to take the edge off, you know?
yeah,
Like,
right. Take the edge off from all this chaos. Like,
oh my God. Jeez. Yeah, but the looks on their faces were classic. Like, I loved it. I
yeah.
loved it. Oh, that's such a good one. Man, oh wow. I remember getting to this point in the episode
Mhm.
and still thinking, oh my God, there's still more? Like,
Yeah.
how is there more?
Yeah. Oh my God.
What?
And there's more things that we have to talk about here.
So in the everything room slash courtyard slash whatever the heck it is, Bloom channels her dragon flame into the crystal when suddenly a blood witch interrupts. This distraction allows Bloom to notice Sky's bloody face just before Sebastian returns, visibly and verbally annoyed by her friend's rescue efforts. Bloom defends her friend's resilience, and Sebastian taunts her, suggesting that they might not make the same effort if they knew how relieved Bloom was to give up her power to him. Oof, that's a lot. He then tries to manipulate Bloom into imagining a life as a normal teenager without the dragon flame. Sebastian reveals that Bloom was actually born 1,000 years ago during an ancient war. Wow. Just like drop that on her while she's about to hand over this like ancient power to you, dude. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Oh, if they like, I'm like basically forcing you to give me your power. Like
I
it's.
know. Like, he's just like playing with his food at this point. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, he's a psycho. It's like into
Genuinely.
making people feel uncomfortable and like knowing more than them and like it's just yeah, psychopath behavior. But he reveals to her that Bloom's mother, a war hero alongside the Dragon Flame, lost control, causing thousands of deaths. And while Bloom's mom was racked with guilt for her actions and passing the burden along to Bloom, her mother put Bloom in stasis on the day that she was born, fearing that she would follow the same path as her mother. Bloom's mom then sealed herself into the realm of darkness. So Sebastian tells Bloom that her parents have been gone for some time now and tries to convince her to relinquish the dragon so she can finally live a power free life like a normal teenager. obviously this backfires on him because now Bloom is so enraged that she continues to channel her magic into the crystal, but maybe not for long.
Yeah. Oh
Oh
my
my god.
gosh. Like, also, we don't know how much of what Sebastian is saying here is true. I think part of this is probably true because a lot of it is in line too with what we know about like Winx Club Bloom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
Valtor did tell a lot of lies about like what happened to Bloom's parents.
Yes, the way that he
So
like totally gaslit her into believing that his life form was directly connected to her parents, and if she killed him, that she would be killing her parents. Like that is also psychopath behavior.
Dark Wizard, like
Oh my god.
100%, like yeah. But I don't think it's true that like I personally would not trust Sebastian's word that like Bloom's mom sealed herself away and didn't want Bloom to have the dragon flame. I think it's going to be the opposite, or I think it would have been the opposite. I say that like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, only because like if the dragon flame was like a great like
But also, if like Miriam passed the flame onto Bloom right before she sealed herself in the realm of darkness, didn't she need the dragon flame to close the portal? So if she didn't have it and Bloom was outside the portal, does that even make any freaking sense?
I don't
No.
know. I have no clue. Like there are so many unanswered questions. I think what I was thinking of is like if she gave birth to Bloom and then passed the dragon flame on, maybe that's why she sealed herself in the realm of darkness because she knew that she no longer possessed the dragon flame during this ancient war, but still wanted to protect herself for the eventual reuniting with her daughter.
Mm.
So, and how this ends at the very end, I guess it kind of does make a little bit of sense if you think
Yeah.
about it like that. But anyways, time goes by and it's now nightfall and we see the girls make their way through the training pond. Stella acknowledges that the specialists are outnumbered, but when Aisha suggests using magic, Tara insists on waiting for Flora to clear the scrapers because she needs all the scrapers focused on her. And if they're using magic, they're not going to follow to where Flora is.
Mm-mm. That's true.
I feel like that's like a big thing too, because like I feel like a lot of people were like, well, why don't they just use their powers? I'm like, well, they can't. Like if they use their
Yeah.
powers, like they will lose their powers.
Yeah, I think that's a good filler for what could have been a plot hole because there's a lot of times when in Winx Club they don't use their powers and it's like, buddy, you forget you can fly. What's going on?
Yeah,
And
like
yeah, that was a good part on the fate to introduce this power limiting scenario. So yeah, I think that was a good part to add in there for them.
I think so too. I think if they follow up with something like that for the reboot too, it'll prevent like these blatant plot holes that are all over the cartoon of like, well, why didn't they use
Yes.
this power? Why didn't they use their magic here?
Yeah, I agree. That's so funny. You're listening to the Winx Forever podcast. If you're enjoying this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, be sure to follow the show on your preferred streaming platform so that you're notified when new episodes are dropped. Hello, fairy friends, and happy 20 years of Winx Club. I'm Lola Valentine, and I am happy to say that the biggest Winx Club fan project to date is now available for free at magicalmemorieszine.com. It is 354 pages of pure nostalgic Winx fun, and I hope that you check it out. We had a blast making it. It took us over a year to plan it and gather fan stories from across the world, your stories from across the world of growing up with Winx Club over the past 20 years. And it's just been such an honor to get to create this love letter for the fandom. So thanks for being a Winx fan, and we hope that you enjoy the Magical Memories fanzine. Download it now for free on magicalmemorieszine.com. So in the hallways of Althea, Flora sprints is a concentrated Eldwin pheromone mixed with her magic to attract the scrapers. When Musa asks how Flora knows it's working, Flora admits she doesn't know and says that they have to just wait and see, when suddenly they just hear just all of these scrapers just approaching like a horror film, like a truly just a horror film. It's so scary. Flora tells Musa to go, so Musa hastily asks how she's going to jab all the scrapers, to which she explains that she's not going to, and she injects herself with this, it's the Eldwin amalgam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, gave the last guy like almost a heart attack when they like put it in him. So after explaining that they'll die once they feed on her, she urges Musa to free the other fairies and inform the suite that they've cleared the field. Musa runs as Flora channels her magic, readying herself as the scrapers slither towards her. Oh my god. Like,
Yeah.
this scene. Oh my god. It, oh, it's a lot. This whole episode's a lot, but like this, Flora's a badass for this. Like,
This was so
straight
cool.
up.
Like she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're just gonna have to feed on me and die, but like I'm gonna inject myself with poison, knowing that like this is super risky. But also, I think like we hear about her like looking for like more solvent, right? So maybe it's diluted just enough to give her a time buffer
Mm-hmm.
versus like was previously introduced a few episodes ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
So
Remember when Tara was like, "Well, where's the antidote?" She's like, "I didn't know there was one." Well, now she
yeah,
knows. So maybe
yeah.
she has that.
Yeah, maybe that too. But like it's really cool to see the scrapers come down the hall because you see them like
Ah,
perk up and like look for the magic and then like turn green. And then when you
it's
see how
so
many there are,
gross.
oh, nasty.
Oh my
So,
gosh. It's for
but
real,
yeah,
like season one, like vibes, like all the way around. Like these creatures are not messing around. Like they're so gross. They're so nasty.
yeah,
I can't get over it.
they did such a good job with the color grading for the shot too. Like it was dark,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't like
Luminous.
yeah, it wasn't
Mm.
horror dark, like cold in the dark forest level dark, but like
Right.
it was good. Like I really liked the way that this looked and the way she channeled her magic before she turned to face them. Oh, it's so nice. But yeah, there is a point that has to be brought up. This is the gripe. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I did not like if there was one thing that I did not enjoy about this scene, it was definitely how the needle went like straight into her arm. I think some other fans have talked about
Eh,
this too.
yeah.
But typically if you jab yourself with something, you would go at like an angle and like enter in
Try and
like
catch a vein.
yeah,
Yeah.
like even at the doctors, like
Hmm.
they they go at like an angle, but this is just like a straight jab into her wrist of all places. Like it'd be more believable if like she put it in
So
her shoulder,
gross.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Ew, ew, ew.
yeah,
That's so gross.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
But I think that's what,
Okay.
like kind of what took me out though, is that like I'm just like that's a really big needle and that's gonna go straight through your arm if you like stab yourself like that. So,
I
so like
know,
at
for
that point,
real.
it's not even hiding that it's a prop needle.
It's true. Oh, Fate, the Winx Saga.
Hmm. See, like, do you see what I mean? Like how that's
Yes,
like,
yes.
oh my
It's like,
gosh,
oh, you
like,
had me until that moment.
yeah.
Like, really? Yeah, yeah, I get it.
On the
Yeah.
battlefield, Tara informs Aisha, noticing that Flora had freed the fairies and they're joining the fight coming out of the forest, concluding that her plan was a success. Stella then
Mhm.
leads them into the school as Musa starts rushing into battle, fighting alongside Riven, with Riven kind of acknowledging Musa's improvement. When she asks for pointers, he saves her just in time by warning her to watch her left.
I live for them.
for real. But
Yeah.
we see some fairies that like the fairies that come in and like show up, but at the same time, like we don't see these fairies in this season using magic on the level that they did in season one.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Like in season one, when that burned one came and crashed down on that fire fairy in season
Yeah.
one, and like he's using his powers, and like there's like,
They
yeah,
have more of a
it's,
background role than they do in this
mm-hmm,
season. Like
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like Winx Club where they forget about the background fairies as the show goes on. Like,
Yeah, I know, so sad. Like,
yeah.
notice that. I'll save
Okay.
that actually.
But yeah, I think like it was giving very much though, like, oh, we're just gonna see this fairy show up and her eyes are gonna glow, but we're not gonna see her actually fight. Like,
Hmm.
okay, like it's budget. Like
Oh,
they
no, fair.
budget and timing here. They're like, we're gonna redirect that. And of course we'll find out what they redirected it towards. But like, yeah,
Ugh.
I was really disappointed by that though, because I feel like I was excited to see the specialists and the fairies fight together, and we didn't really get a lot of that. So
No,
granted,
sad.
most of them were like passed out too, like in the dungeon, but
Yeah,
some
and
of
like
them were
didn't have their
still,
powers.
yeah, but I don't know.
Ugh.
They could have at least shown some other fairies like fighting.
Yeah, the ones that still did have their powers. That,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a lot of corals, but we'll get to that in a
Hmm.
minute.
Well, when Flora killed the scrapers, the fairies got their magic back too. That was something that Sebastian hadn't really established earlier. Because I remember when Musa had lost her magic, he told Bloom that there were two ways to get it back: to kill the scraper or to get the scraper,
That took your
took
magic
it.
to give it back.
Yeah, probably not going to happen, or to kill him. But I guess
Uh-huh.
killing a scraper returned the magic to those fairies that were freed.
Enough time to like drain everybody yet.
Hmm.
So I think those are the ones that like were able to go and fight. I don't think that, oof, I don't know, it's kind of dark, but I don't think that all of the fairies that got drained got their powers back because some of them might have been scrapers.
I'm thinking about it now. So, like, killing a scraper doesn't necessarily mean returning the fairy magic, right?
I don't think so. I thought
I don't
Trigger
think
did
so
it.
either, now that I'm thinking about
Yeah.
it. I'm assuming that those fairies still had their powers because they hadn't been drained yet. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. Now I'm like putting it together. Okay, so we can probably scrap my little tangent there. But
Okay.
uh
But I mean, the point about like, yeah, us needing to see more magic is fair.
yeah, oh yeah, right there.
Oh, yeah.
Aisha leads Stella and Tara through the greenhouse where they encounter Gray. He reveals his brother died in Astrodel and Sebastian promised to revive him, hoping to eventually escape like expectations from the Blood Witches. Aisha is super upset about this, demands that Gray stops, and then accuses him of lying throughout their entire relationship. Gray insists that his feelings were genuine, but Aisha explains that while it was real for him, like he is the one who knew the truth, and because of that
Oh,
he gets to have those memories, he gets to keep them, but they're like ruined for her. She
so
tells Gray
true.
that he'll have to live with the choices that he made before reaffirming that they're going inside, and then they all just like move right past them.
I thought that that was so like when she said that about like, yeah, they're true for you because you knew what was happening all along. Like that hit me. Like,
Yes.
dang, that's so true though. I mean,
Yeah,
like, oh, yeah, that was such
I'm
a
so
good
glad that
like
they like,
moment for her.
right,
Yeah.
because like yes, there are definitely levels to like that he was dishonest, but also he's been raised in this environment. There's so much to think about, but also the simple fact is that through his actions, he lied. He could have been upfront
Mm-hmm.
this entire time and worked
Mm-hmm.
with the Winx
Mm-hmm.
or like the girls of the Winx suite, but like he didn't. I do think though he has the capacity for good. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and we'll kind of see that here as the rest of this episode unfolds.
So in the courtyard slash Bloom's emotional and magical instability rises as she channels her magic into this crystal, with Sebastian eagerly awaiting the completed power transfer. But then Beatrix interrupts, ignoring Sebastian's attempt to shoo her away, and questions if Bloom knows Sebastian's plans for the dragon flame. This distresses Bloom, who briefly glances at Sky before dismissing it. Anticipating this, Beatrix gets in one last snarky comment before firing electricity at Sky, causing him to hit the ground below. Panicked, Bloom breaks her connection to the crystal and rushes over to weep over Sky. Meanwhile, Sebastian rises from examining the crystal shards on the ground and demands if Beatrix realizes what she had just done. Beatrix stands firm and she affirms, like, yeah, I just saved the world. Her victory is cut short by Sebastian just blasting every flavor of stolen magic towards Beatrix, presumably killing her upon impact as she hits the wall behind her and falls to the ground with a puddle of blood leaking from her head.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my
Like
god.
this,
I can't believe they showed this.
I can't believe they, yeah, right? Like when this happened, everybody that I had told, like, hey, are you gonna watch season two? I got text messages like people lost it at this scene. Like, what just happened to Beatrix? Like,
Mhm.
oh, it's so sad. Like,
Oh my god.
also, like, if you look at Sebastian's magic blast, in the final edit, they kind of like tightened the scene ever so slightly, but there was a VFX like show reel that showcased a slightly longer version of that. And you could see that when he fired like his magic, he was firing like every color of fairy magic towards Beatrix.
So like it was like rage filled, like
Yeah, she was
fire
cooked.
shot. Oof, that's so sad. And it's like it's scary that like he just like so easily just like nope, you're dead. Like
Yeah,
that's terrifying.
there was also a moment too, like where if you looked at his face, there was almost like a moment of like, what the, like, what did I just do? So yeah, it's just, it's so sad. But I do want to point out though that the convergence crystal destabilizes emotions and magic. And Bloom obviously doesn't have full control of her power if she's already riled up from Sebastian and she's just trying to
Mm-hmm.
give it up. And then Beatrix shows up and she's over there like looking up at Sky and she's just like, oh no, I'm not gonna let my boyfriend die. So she's
Right.
completely out of it at this point. And I think Beatrix kind of recognized that. She's like, figured you'd say that. And then
Mm-hmm.
tells her
Just
to
zaps him.
remember that she said that. So it's kind of like a little joke. Remember that you said that because you're going to eventually look back on this and be like, that was really stupid. But yeah, just overall, like the entire thing, thank God Beatrix showed up because had she not,
Honestly.
this would have gone in a completely different direction. So I'm glad that she got her last moments in, but at the same time, she's been doomed from the start because she killed Callum in season one and
Mm-hmm.
never really faced any repercussions for that. And I feel like it's kind of a literary cinematic trope that if you kill somebody like that, it's gonna come back around. Like that's a
Yeah.
tale as old as time. Like I
So
suspected,
true.
yeah. Like I was like, when is like Beatrix gonna get like everything handed to her? Because like
Mm,
she's not inherently evil, but at the same time, like she's done some pretty bad things.
really bad stuff for sure.
Yeah.
I know, and I think that we forget that in this season because we're all like, "Oh, poor Beatrix, she's all alone."
Yeah.
Like she killed a man last season.
Yeah.
It wasn't as traumatic as her death for sure because like he just like vanished like into the air like the Avengers or something, I don't know. And so like yeah, it wasn't as gruesome or as graphic for sure. They definitely like upped that in this season, which
Yeah.
I'm not a gore like person. Like I don't
Hmm.
like that stuff.
They
Tricks fell to
left
the
it all in
ground. I
season
was
one.
like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Crazy.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, when Beatrix died in this shot, like, we already know that when fairies die, they're supposed to release life essence, and she doesn't release anything.
Ooh.
Instead, we see blood. And I'm just like, okay, like,
Ooh.
with what we find out later here too, I'm just like, is Beatrix really a fairy, or is Beatrix something entirely different? And
I
maybe
go
is
ahead.
that why she stands out so much? Like, I don't.
I also wonder. Well, we'll talk about fan theories like at the end, but like
Mhm.
I have theories about that. After
Okay.
discussing it, thinking about it more, yeah, I've got some messed up theories for sure. Okay.
Yeah. We got to get into it because this is like the peak that should have been the peak for the episode, but it's also kind of not. As Bloom's fury rises, she ignites into her fairy form, locking a fiery gaze on Sebastian, who then proceeds to compare her to her mother, warning of potential destruction. She dismisses his warning, not even caring what could happen if she totally blows up. Stella, Tara, and Aisha appear from Stella's invisibility spell, reminding Bloom that she doesn't have to fight alone.
Ah!
Despite her order for them to leave and get everybody as far away as possible, they stay to help, and Gray arrives to keep Sky alive using Blood Witch magic around his heart. Bloom detransforms to tend to Sky, locks eyes with the taunting Sebastian, who then pushes her about the limits of her magic as she fails to transform again. Everybody's just kind of at this stalemate, just standing around. He breaks the silence rather quickly by teasing that Beatrix basically died for nothing. The girls accept the situation, and Stella sees what has happened, channeling everything. Her eyes light up. As they surround Sebastian, they proceed to transform together and combine their powers to help shatter this defensive shield that he puts up. In this moment, Bloom discharges her magic from the convergence crystal shards and fires her powers towards him, and they all collectively obliterate him.
Convergence, magic wings.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, I want to
It's
hear your thoughts on all of this because I
okay.
have many.
Yeah, it's interesting that the guy who has all these different flavors of fairy magic is still no match for the teamwork of these four girls taking him on. And I think that that is a testament to the fact that obviously convergence is like a big theme for this season, and
Mhm.
working together with your friends. I thought it was really cool that Stella created the mirage around the
Yeah.
transformation sequence with her powers. I will say that's the one thing that I have found unbelievable since season one. I think season one, the intro to the transformation was really cool when Bloom was staring off as the water was swirling around her. I thought it looked really cinematic. But here it was just a little too camp. And it kind of takes me out of the whole thing. My friend Alvaro actually pointed out that Stella has a crown as she floats down from the sequence with her wings.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's
like a little
cute.
crown to symbolize that she's like a royal
Okay.
fairy. Um,
Cute.
I thought that was like a cool touch that they left in there. I just thought the whole thing was confusing though. Like the way that the wings change in size throughout this entire thing was too much.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like this whole I hate well, I don't want to say I hated it because I liked some aspects of it, but like it was hard to watch. It was
Like
hard because like yeah, the campiness of it, but too like this can't be the final battle. It's so anticlimactic.
and
There
so
is
short.
no
Yeah.
it's so short. They just transform and then poof, he's gone. No, I want a battle. I want them to go at each other's throats back and forth. I want there to be like close calls for like the Wink Sweet girls. Like I want it to feel like a even match because it should have
Yeah.
been. He was supercharged with all this power from so many fairies. Didn't
They should
make
have been
any
like running
sense.
around this entire everything room. Like use up the space of the
Yes.
everything room. Like
Use up all the everything
like
space.
that's exactly what I was saying. And then
Yes.
like I get that they were maybe trying to do like this symbolic formation or something, like trying to like symbolize that they're all coming together to focus on this one evil point or whatever, but
It
like
felt cheap.
it felt very cheap. It also felt weird because at one point we see Sebastian turn and Tara cast a spell and the frame rate changes. It's no longer
Yep, yep,
24
yep,
frames per
yep,
second. It's
yep,
that weird, like, you see what I mean?
yep.
And I was like, this looks so bad outside of.
I wonder if it was because of when this series was in post, like everyone was working from home. And so
Yeah,
there wasn't that
maybe.
there was traversely on the post-production side of the show, even though it's all about unity and working together, like everyone working on the show was very segmented off from each other because it was during COVID times still. And like so I wonder if that played a part in it. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, but like, dude, like the transformation sequence, like it felt cheapened also because we already knew that it was coming. Like we knew it from the teaser trailer and the full trailer. Like it was like they already told us what was gonna happen. So like that wasn't cool. Like then to experience it, we're like, oh yeah, like yay. I don't know. Like what do you say?
Hmm.
Good for
I
them.
think,
I don't know.
yeah, like the soundtrack to Brian Young has some amazing music taste, but like to go from like Odessa to this, like this grime song that like is very
Fell
fitting,
flat.
but yeah, it was not as cinematic as like
It
season one.
wasn't. Season one transformation was so good. Comparatively
Hmm.
to this now that we have like to compare it to, it
It was just
doesn't
a completely
compare.
different vibe. And also
Yes.
the aftermath too. I think mainly the fight in season one, that was so epic.
These things around,
Yeah,
she was
yeah.
blasting them. They were getting like disintegrated.
I wanted
I
that
didn't get
too.
that.
And we
Like there should have been other blood witches that came into the fight that like the other people like faced off with while Bloom faced off with Valtor. Like it
hmm
just there could have been so much more like dynamic features that they could have introduced, but they just didn't.
yeah,
And again, I think that like a lot plays into it, like budget and the
COVID
fact
too. Yeah. Like maybe they
COVID
couldn't
and
be in such close proximity with all those extras on set.
it was just sad. Like that's why like this whole episode I've been like this does not feel like a season finale because I
Mm-mm.
knew what we were like leading up to and that this is what it was leading up to and it's just like, "Oh, it's over?" Like I blinked and it was over.
It's almost
Like
like they figured that they were like it's almost like, how do I say it? Maybe it could have, maybe with that extra episode, this could have gone in a completely different direction. But maybe they were anticipating that season three, with like a higher budget and everything, was going to be like the big thing, the big moment. And
I feel like they put all of their eggs in one basket, and
yeah,
that one basket was not the right basket to put them in.
mm-mm. And I think I can also see the perspective though that like after the feedback from season one by both the critics and a lot of the fans, maybe they wanted to
Mhm.
attempt to like kind of listen to some of these aspects. They asked for camp. They asked for something that was like a little less serious because it's Winx. It shouldn't be so dark and brooding or whatever. But this
I just
is
feel like there's
the
a
end
better
result. Yeah, there's a
way.
better way to do
Yeah.
that.
That's the other thing too. I can't think of a transformation sequence of a live action series that like has done it any better or differently. Like the live action Moon film. Like
The
I
live
don't know.
action, like, yeah, I know what you're talking
Like
about.
and so there's like yeah, like there you just like are like can you think of examples of like transformation sequences?
There was like an actually it's a perfume advertisement. Like there's a perfume advertisement and there's like a Charlie XCX song in the background. And I think it's Hunter Schafer who like is like transforming into like this like I don't it's like a very it's like runway model giving Tynix Dreamix like in space
Oh,
vibes. And I'm like, well, that
okay.
looked really cool. Like, why didn't they do something like
But even that commercial for the Jack Pacific dolls
mhm.
that has been circulating, especially recently, and everyone's
Yeah,
like, this
yeah.
could have been fate. Like, yeah, and that was like a commercial budget. Like, why couldn't we have gotten that?
Yeah,
Like,
that would have looked better, honestly. Like not like
honestly.
all the outfits and everything that they used. The filming of that commercial though did look better than
Hmm.
what they ended up going with here.
I
So
know.
yeah,
I know. Oh, man, that's crazy. Yes, I just wish it was better. I hope that with the graphic novels that we're getting, that they will address some of this in the written format. So I think that that'll be
yeah.
interesting to watch out for, but this was not it.
I think that's the nice thing about the graphic novel continuation too, is that she can draw whatever she wants on the page for the most part. And I think
Hmm.
there's so much more freedom to create these scenarios that look really good. Because like in the Winx Club
Hmm.
comics, the comic panel transformations look so good sometimes.
Pretty, yeah.
When the tricks transform in the comics and you're like, oh, that's how they do it. Like
Ah!
looked so cool. So like I
Oh my
think there
god.
is potential and there's something to look forward to with that.
So sad for us, though,
Real.
watching this. Oh
Very
my
a
God.
very expensive creative decision here. So
Definitely. We'll go with that.
yeah. Oh, I guess we can move on to the next stuff
Oh.
though, because the rest of this is just like fast,
Boom, boom,
but
boom. Yeah.
startled as she awakens covered in blood and wounds, Flora tearfully smiles, realizing that her friends have saved the day. In the graveyard, Luke wakes up and hugs Dane while Musa knocks out a blood witch. And realizing their victory, Silva like helps Kat up. So we have all these like loose ends that are like slowly being
Mm-hmm.
tied off. And then Musa's powers flow back into her, and she hears Stella's screams in that moment. Back in the courtyard, Bloom hugs Sky. Tara comforts Stella, who's like crouching down and just like bawling over Beatrix. And Bloom kind of like fills Sky in on like how he died. We see like Aisha and Gray go their separate ways in the background, just like ever so
Oh yeah.
briefly. But Bloom then all of a sudden Bloom has a vision of Shadow, a tower, and the conduit, and this kind of like causes Sky to like take alert, like, are you okay? And she's like insisting that she's fine, kind of like pulling what he does, where he like says everything's fine and it's
Mm-hmm.
not, before insisting that they have to get everybody back to the suite.
Oh,
Love the ensemble thing going on, like where we get to see everybody in this moment. But like, I think Musa getting her powers back is definitely the highlight of this whole thing. Like,
yes.
that was
Absolutely.
the chills, like just seeing her face like as she's like experiencing all of this, and she's like experiencing what had just happened on the inside.
Yeah.
Intense. Like, yeah, that'll like
It
forever wreck me.
it was so sad because like we all knew it was coming. But I feel like watching it the first time you forget, but like rewatching it and knowing that it's coming, like it just hits harder almost. It's like,
Yeah,
oh man, oh
it's
my God.
rough.
It is so rough.
One thing that did take me out, there was one line in here, and let me know if you feel the same way, when
Okay.
Bloom's like, you kind of just died or like something like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, what? Like,
Oh,
I don't know if
yeah.
that was intentional, because like, you know how fate throws in like some of those intentional awkward moments, but like it was definitely an awkward moment.
It was awkward because she goes from that to like having that vision.
Yeah.
And it was just like this light, like hearted, like kind of awkward, cringy thing. And then just like, bam, don't forget about this. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
like I felt like whiplash.
For sure.
Yeah, that was so cringy.
But I will say Abby did such a good job in this episode though. I was so like immersed in like just seeing like how frustrated she was getting in some of these moments with
Mm-hmm.
Sebastian. Like, she
Mm-hmm.
really sold it.
Oh yeah, Abby
Yeah.
is phenomenal for sure. I think that my favorite Abby scenes are still coming up though.
Oh yes, okay.
Yeah.
So later, the girls try to relax in the suite, and like Bloom hands out pillows, Musa brings snacks, and they share some lighthearted banter about their like soreness from flying or magic or whatever.
You're good.
They discuss the aftermath, including the blood witch is clearing out, Gray being allowed to like go back to his family as long as he like never comes back to Althea, and Silva's suggestion to bury Beatrix in the graveyard. Reflecting on Beatrix's actions, Bloom and Stella like acknowledge her complex motives, like with everybody present, while like also taking note of the essential help that she provided, which I thought was like a really good
Yeah.
moment, because like Stella obviously cared about Beatrix, and that's like, you can see it on like Bloom's face as she like is like saying like, imagine what would have happened had Beatrix not shown up. Like, you can
Mm-hmm.
see like Bloom like comfort her, like, and
Yeah.
of course, you know, Stella's more emotionally mature at this point too. Like, she can deal with like hugs and physical touches now, versus like before
Yeah.
she was very like, nobody touched me, I'm a princess. Like,
Yeah.
so
Wow.
I thought that was sweet and really sad. Musa then advises Bloom to like go get some rest, and like assures her that like she'll take care of everybody else. And as Bloom heads to her room, she like turns around to see like everybody's like spirits kind of like lifting up in this moment.
Yeah, it's lighthearted at the same time, and I like it a lot. Like this is Winx. Like this
Yes.
moment, like Like,
Flora's wink to Stella.
yes, Flora's wink
Yes.
to Stella. Stella, yeah, being like, that's my roommate. Like, that's so cute. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, just all of it. And like, I love it. Like them in the Wink Suite, which is funny that it's called like Faith the Wink Saga, that we never got more explanation other than, oh, their dorm is called the Wink Suite. Like, I wish that we had gotten that. But even still, like them all together, like, it's so Winx.
Yeah,
Winx.
for sure. So the Tate McRae song was perfect for this scene too. Like just a sad I think it's like an alternative. I listened to the full song and I think this is an alternate like version of it for broadcast because it
Ooh,
does not sound
okay.
the same. Or maybe they like took off some of the instruments like when they were like mixing it into the show, but I really
Wow.
liked it though. Such a good song.
Yeah.
Oh, ooh, okay. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah. So late at night at her bedroom desk, Bloom examines the Blood Witch text before exiting quietly, taking one last glance at her sleeping suitemates before leaving a stack of letters in the kitchenette. Longingly, she examines the suite one last time before exiting with a singular letter still in her hand.
An
Moment.
idea. If
Wait,
you've seen
oh
Winx
yeah.
Club, like you know what's happening.
She can't go a season without leaving Althea.
Yeah,
She really cannot.
but this time she's not
Uh,
going back to Gardenia, which is like, I guess
yeah.
that's a little different. But yeah,
Yeah.
like the shot where Bloom's writing her letters, there's a really good cinematic moment where we see her go from the Blood Witch text to focusing on a pen and paper, but you have to watch it through the gem mirror because you can't
Yes,
really
yes,
see it.
yes. Oh
I
my
love that. It
gosh.
was such a good artistic touch to the filming style. And I feel like they do that a lot in this show, but that part really got me because then we see her exiting the suite with all these letters in her hand, and you're like, oh no.
So back in the Althea dungeons where the Undercroft is, Bloom encounters the conduit from her premonition. Sky then comes and confronts her holding the farewell letter that she left him, and he questions it, learning from Bloom that it's a conduit to the realm of darkness. She explains that the only way to close it is from the other side, and that Sebastian actually wanted the dragon flame to prevent anyone from having enough magic to close it, which is that's pretty scary. Sky accuses her of seeking a way out for a while, but Bloom insists that she's dangerous and her mom knew it, and that's why she sealed herself away. And this is how she can save the other world. Despite Sky's pleas, Bloom feels that this is part of her fate, so they share a heartfelt moment, professing their love and kissing before Bloom walks into the portal and closing the conduit, leaving Sky like sniffling sadly in the dungeon alone. This was my favorite Bloom part.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
whole like string of like moments making this hard decision. She's made hard decisions this whole season, but I think that this one was probably the hardest because she is losing her found family in this decision. Like, yeah, it's crazy. I think a little bit too. We mentioned how Sebastian might not have been telling the whole truth and trying to bait her during their quote unquote fight. And I think that she let him get to her a lot in that moment because, like you said, she was very unstable in her emotions and her power. So, like, she's very vulnerable. But I think that this is a direct correlation to those instances of him, kind of baiting her. But I don't know. Abby did just such a great job during these scenes explaining that emotion of the weight of this decision for Bloom. Ugh,
I have
it
goosebumps right now thinking about it
yeah,
again.
like
Like
it
it's
wrecks me. It wrecks
yeah,
me entirely. Like and
the
and then
moments.
Sky coming
Yeah,
up and like man, it's just so much. Yeah.
it's rough. Like when she was staring back at the portal and you could like see that she's been crying and like her face is just like, oh my gosh, like that, like I was so shocked the first time I saw it, and especially when I rewatched it, but like because it's such a dark moment for Winx. Like that's a really heavy decision. And yeah.
And what does it remind you of? Does it remind you of season 3 when Technic closes the portal from the inside?
Yes, that is a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Like these are emotions that the Winx had to deal with in the series,
Hmm.
and it's like they had to deal with it after fighting like an enormous battle with the witches during this
Yeah.
moment. And so like it being actualized and coming in this live action is just another level. It's just so
Yeah,
crazy
they
because like they did it. Like they did that.
yes, they
Like
did.
oh, it's
And
so good.
the stakes are so high too here that like it's just, especially with the way the rest of this episode goes, I was in tears watching this. Like
Mhm.
I was so heartbroken that I remember like at the end I'm like there has to be a third season, right?
Yeah, and then a month
I was
later we're like,
like,
well, crap.
I'll wait for that ambulance to go by in the
Oh, I can
background.
even hear it. That's funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, like also something to take note of too is that she made a really good point that like Sebastian didn't really need the dragon flame to like open this. He already opened it earlier
Yeah.
before she even like
He didn't
started
want
giving it.
anyone to close it.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think
Mm.
that like it makes you question like a lot of what Sebastian says his intentions are too, and like kind of like what he's saying in general, like how much is real, how much is not. Like
Mm-hmm.
is the stuff that even pertains to his experience and the reasons why that he does the things he does even the truth. Like there's a lot of layers to that. And I don't know, I was so floored by like seeing Bloom also like cross into the portal after this, because Sky had made a point in like the beginning of the season that like he was like, I can't stop you because I know you're going to do it anyways, like I'm not even going to try. And it's like, oh, he knows that he has to let her go through.
Yeah.
And he recognizes that she's been looking for a way out for a while, which if we remember Bloom pulling back when she was like spending the night in the cottage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot has been building up to this. Not just there being a freaking whole portal and the undercroft, which like, I'm sorry. Why did none of the adults recognize this? Why did none of them be like, oh hey, what should we do about this guy? Like
Yeah.
this whole portal just hanging out underneath Althea. Oh, they're so incompetent. I can't. I
Like
cannot.
I wonder if it, yeah, I don't know like why nobody else checked out the space after the blood witches. Well, I guess it's still the same night though, so like
I guess so, yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
I
Honestly, who
guess,
who the hell's in
yeah.
charge at this point?
I
Like
know. Who's in charge here? I want to talk to your manager. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
So
Um,
goofy.
following morning, Aisha wakes up,
Mhm.
spots the stack of letters, and immediately frowns. She races to Bloom's room, notices she's gone, and informs the other girls. Shocked, everybody starts opening their letters as they get passed around, and tears just start flowing, and there's a big group hug, and it's just so sad from this point on, because the next scenes, not only are they applicable with the song for what's going on screen, but I think also knowing that
Mhm.
this is not getting renewed, it's almost like
Oh.
now that we're looking back on it and seeing all these details, like I feel like I have a greater appreciation for the series after doing this rewatch with you. And I think
Oh.
this kind of gut punches me a little bit on
Mm.
that point, because we get this song called Meaning, and it's like the lyrics are, but someday you'll understand the meaning of my life, someday you'll understand the meaning of these words. And the meaning of the words in the song, also knowing that the show's over and everything that happens here is just a dark path. Sometimes, as Bloom from Original Winx Club said, it was the season 6 trailer, not all fairy tales have a happy ending. And I think that this is kind of that moment.
I know,
But
and it's so sad, like her wandering this wasteland that is the realm of darkness, and it's just bleak. Like
yeah,
the rest of the episode, like how it ends is just like Oh, it's
And
so.
it's so artistically filmed too. Like when she's like
Mhm.
for the next shot in the realm of darkness, she strolls along this windswept ridge of land that's just like empty. And she's like
Mhm.
going on a downward plane. Like, so like
Mm,
things are kind of going downhill for like where she's at. And like there's like this shot of the sun in the background, which is kind of like
yeah.
making me think back to like wildest dreams and how like
Oh.
sky is like the sky and then blooms the flower and like yeah, like it's just a really sad like emotional journey to see that song throughout this entire
Mhm.
season, like in the way that it's
Wow.
like been immortalized into the story.
You're so right, though.
Yeah, isn't that rough? Like,
That's so
oh,
sad.
because like oh, I totally forgot the lyrics for Wildest Dreams, but there's say you'll remember me standing in a nice dress, staring at the
Staring at the
sunset.
sun!
Yes. And so
No!
that's gonna come
Oh
up here like
no.
again when we get through these like last few scenes. But
Like you said, these like little tie up moments that we get here in the last like scenes of this episode and of the series happen so fast, and it's all in this like montage sort of like pieced together moment. And so we see that time has passed, and Musa is staring pensively into the distance as Riven, like, comes up to her and, is carrying the runic limiters that she puts on. And then it flashes to Kat entering the Winx suite and hugging Tara before they walk off together, with Flora smiling in the background for her cousin. And then it gives us Stella, who is placing a fresh white lily on Beatrix's grave in the graveyard, while in the realm of darkness, Bloom is staring towards the tower that she's been having in her vision. Then we have Aisha in the grass near the end of the river, gazing up at the hawk flying overhead, then sits up with a sad expression because it was the hawk that, like, Gray always talked about in their swimming spot.
if you
And
get too close, oh, that's
oh
so
my
sad.
gosh. And then to follow up on the runic limiters for Musa, we then get a scene of Riven and Musa sparring, smiling at each other while doing it, like Musa in her element, clearly. But in the realm of darkness, Bloom is walking closer and closer to the tower in this like really desolate landscape, like we said. And Aisha is like silently crying by the stream by herself when she's surprised by a hand that appears on her shoulder, and she turns to face like freaking Gray of all people. Oh my
And he
god.
looks
So
white
like
too, crying or
so
something. Like,
sad.
yeah.
Yeah. And then this is the one that like freaking like sent me through the roof. Like the next scene we get after that is in the Winx suite bathroom. Flora is removing her jacket and tearfully like studying the deep wounds like on her chest, and like it's just, oh my god. That's so much for me. Like that's too much for me. Like that one was a lot.
And she sold
Um
it too, like the way she like stared down after and like just had tears in her eyes. And it kind of like takes me back to like when Musa was like even the quiet ones. Like when they
oh,
were in the suite together. It's just so
yes.
rough.
It's so rough. And then we see at Beatrix's grave, Stella stands up and she reads the note that Sebastian gave to Beatrix, which reads Isabel and Darcy Daniels, and an address 9A
It's
Berry,
Tewksbury, yeah.
Tewksbury, Diamond Hill. And when Stella walks away, the wind starts to pick up, and the fresh lily withers, like dies, as we see Shadow appear, this like ominous figure that Bloom saw in her visions and also in the Blood Witch book. He appears next to Beatrix's grave, just like looming over it. And then it cuts to the realm of darkness as Raven's caw in the distance. Bloom enters the dark tower that she's been walking towards. Making her way inside, she sees a shadowy figure perched over a large cauldron of fire. Approaching the figure, Bloom notices the female figure's long orange hair. And as the figure turns to face her, Bloom mutters one last word, freaking just mom, before it cuts to credits. Heartbreakingly, indefinitely, as Fate was canceled by Netflix, leaving Bloom forever in the realm of darkness. Girl, bye.
Oh my gosh.
And scene.
Like, there are a few things to talk about with the way that they montage this too, because like
Mm-hmm.
when we saw like Musa staring off in the distance, right? Like then all of a sudden, like she's trapped in her thoughts again, and Riven shows up
Mm-hmm.
with the runic limiters and he's like there to save the day.
Yes.
Love that because he has an understanding of who she is and what she really feels. And I think it's nice that
Yeah.
he did that and that they had that understanding. That was so cute. Just seeing them come back together and then Flora's happy for them off in the background, even though she's going through
Mm-hmm.
all of this that we find out a few scenes later.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
the hawk at the river, that is where I was just taken out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also taken out by like the way that they filmed Stella placing the fresh white lily on the grave. I mean, obviously that's a very symbolic flower for like
Mm-hmm.
showing condolences and like paying your respects to people who have passed on. We see like Bloom kind of like at the same time, like after that stare off at this tower that she had been envisioning for like the longest time too.
Yeah.
I just like the way that like all of this is filmed. I think it looks really good. In the realm of darkness, like when Bloom walks closer to the tower in the desolate landscape, she's staring head on with the sun, which again ties back into the Taylor Swift lyrics, like staring at the sunset, sunset babe, like calling a guy a sunset, but like also,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's so sad. Like,
Yeah.
because they really are complementary to each other in that sense of like,
And two, did you notice the only main character we didn't get like a checkup on after Bloom enters the realm of darkness in this montage sequence was Sky. He's not in, like, we don't know how he's doing
mm-mm.
after Bloom, like left him in the undergrowth.
Yeah,
So like it's really sad.
we didn't see
Like,
any more of Dane and Luke either after that. Like,
yeah, no,
yeah, so it's rough. It's got to be rough. I did want to make note though, like the way that they filmed, obviously the whole bathroom scene with Flora was like really,
mm,
really heartbreaking. But like for Beatrix's grave scene, like when Stella opened the note at Beatrix's grave and reads it, I actually looked up what Tewksbury is, and I think it has something to do with a place in Massachusetts related to the Salem witch trials.
shut up, get out.
Yeah, I don't know what the full context is, but it's in Massachusetts. There's a place in Massachusetts called Tewksbury, but it's one letter that's flipped. And I'm like,
Mm,
oh, okay, like Massachusetts makes me think of the witch trials,
mm-hmm.
though.
Incredible.
I don't know what the 9A could be, but like that was like just a little nod to
But
like the fact that they're probably witches.
yeah, no, and for the listeners, like following along, like Isabel and Darcy, obviously Darcy is the sister of the three witches in Winx Club. We think that Isabel is a nod to Icy, the lead sister, the oldest sister, I assume, and in the tricks. And then also we know at this point that Beatrix was heavily coded as Stormy. She's even called Little Storm by Andreas in this season. So I have theories, which like we'll get to fan theories in a minute. I want to talk about our first, like our fate forever moments before, because I feel like fan theories are going to be like a lot. So like we'll
Yeah.
get these out of the way. So what was your fate forever moment from this episode?
I would say at the very end, like in the Wink Suite, like when they're all just like kind of regrouping and relaxing and like
Mhm.
playfully going back and forth with each other. I feel like that was like was very Winx. But like
Yeah.
honestly, this entire episode was just about like teamwork and collaboration and like working together and making hard decisions when you need to make hard decisions. So
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
yeah. But I think that's like my favorite like moment that reminded me of Winx Club.
I agree. Yeah, it's the scene in the Wink Suite for sure. Like it's just all of them together. It was a very beautiful moment, even though it was ruined moments later by Bloom just leaving everybody. But also that, in a sense, is very Winx. Not just Bloom leaving Althea, but Bloom making hard decisions for like the fate of the realm. Like
Yeah.
that's very Winx for sure. But yeah, what an episode! What a freaking series!
I did like that when Bloom left Althea though. Like there's so much more than just like a woe is me kind of
Oh
like sob
yes.
story going on. Like
Oh yeah.
there's
Yes.
definitely like selfless intention at least with what she's doing. She's not just leaving because she's sad
She
and
feels
she's
sorry for
embarrassed.
herself. Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I know. So that's a stark comparison to our girl Bloom in this original series. But because this is the last episode in the series and it was cut off at such a pivotal moment in what could have been something really cool the next season, there are a ton of fan theories out there for Fate the Winx saga, and I would love to get into some of those with you, and even like our own theories, of
Yeah.
like what could have happened in a third season, but also what I mean, we won't theorize about like what the graphic novels will be because those are coming out soon and we can do that in a different time.
Mhm.
But yeah, like what a third season would have looked like and like what it could have held for continuing this story. Oh, yeah. I think this is one of mine. So, we mentioned that like it was alluded to that Beatrix might have been a witch. There wasn't any fairy life essence that poured out from her once she passed. But how did she get her fairy powers? I think that Rosalind instructed probably Andreas to give her fairy powers with a scraper, like when she was young, so that she would have powers. And so maybe Beatrix doesn't even know that she's not a fairy.
And it would make sense too because we literally see scrapers taking fairy magic this entire season. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very
And
likely. Yeah.
Rosalind had been studying scrapers like earlier in the season too. So like what's to say that she wasn't already doing that like before she was put into stasis? So that's just one theory I had of like that would make sense of like why Beatrix is a witch but has fairy powers. Yeah. Ugh. So that's just one
Also, wasn't
of mine.
Beatrix put into stasis too? No, I don't think it was ever said if she was put into stasis, but like Rosalind burned a memory into her mind when she was a baby.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess that is
Maybe
something to think about.
Rosalind, do you think that Rosalind didn't know which one had the dragon fire power
Yeah, maybe she was torn between
or
both
the
of
dragon
them.
flame? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. But like now I'm thinking about the timeline in the 1000 years in stasis thing.
Mm-hmm.
Was Beatrix around for the 1000-year war, like, or the 1000-year-old war, or was she from the,
Maybe she was from Astrodel?
yeah. I think in
Since
season one though, like, wasn't there something about like her not actually being from Astrodel?
no, because she had family in Astrodel, didn't she? And that's where Rosalind found her.
I thought that's how it was introduced, but I thought that afterwards there was something. Maybe I could be like, I don't know for sure actually, and now I'm like mixing it up. But I could have sworn there was something too where Rosalind said something like she's not from Astrodel, like revealed it to her.
Oh, fudge. I
But I
don't
could
know.
just be. I would have to go back and check on that. I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't know, but that's my theory for Beatrix at least.
it's a good theory.
Thanks. I think that Riven and Musa like are platonic. I don't think that they like each other. And like if there were a third season, I think that they would have been more like I don't know. But yeah,
I
I don't know.
think, yeah, like between Musa and Riven, like when Riven had gotten angry at Musa during the combat and had gotten a little aggressive and he'd kneed her
Yeah.
down. And then
Mm-hmm.
Dane was like, whoa, calm down, Riven. I wonder if, because we know that they had a very chaotic and like abusive at times relationship in the
Mm-hmm.
original
Mm-hmm.
series and comics, and they weren't always nice to each other. And so I think they may have just had a very rocky relationship in the third season. Like
Ooh,
maybe there's
yeah.
something that
Like
they would
true
have,
Riven and Misa fashion.
yeah,
Yeah, that's so
that would
true.
have been interesting to see.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but it would have to be done very carefully. Like,
Mm-hmm. And like, whew, and Stella, I think that Stella would have gone and found the sisters. I think that Shadow would have, or might still, we don't know, like resurrected Beatrix, maybe for good, maybe for evil, probably for evil, definitely for evil. And yeah, and I think that the Shadow would have turned out to be like a Lord Darkar esque. And I think that's what Olivia was alluding to in my
mhm.
interview with her. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out in the graphic novels. But there's just so much like open endedness and like you obviously they were banking on a third season
Didn't
and
get it.
yeah, it's just sad. I'm trying to think. Oh, and then like obviously the Cat and Tara stuff, like that would have been expounded upon. Flora would have like struggled with having the scars of like her past almost. Like there is a reminder of like what she's kind of like lost in a sense. Is like this really beautiful fairy that like now has all these like battle scars on her and like having to deal with that I think would have been a cool thing to have like walked through with that character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
But
did she ever
oh,
get her powers back? Like because of the scrapers? Like, did the scrapers? Yeah, because she's like the only one who had magic stuck in a scraper.
mm-hmm.
So is she gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
like reboot her magic again? Like, 'cause it's like a battery or whatever. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to explore. Do you think Shadow would have transformed into like the Shadow Phoenix, like Lord Darkar looking? Like,
I think that he probably would have gathered his powers by resurrecting more and more dead. And
mm,
as he resurrected more and more, he would have transformed more into what his true form was, not just the
yeah,
shadow creature.
I
But I
think
would have,
too.
yeah.
Do you
Oof.
remember in season one too, with like the invitation to the Black Lagoon where Stella
Mm,
goes and then the tricks are there and they like kidnap her and take the ring?
mm-hmm.
I wonder if with that note, like in the fact that Stella has a note to go to an address, if she would have gone there and like maybe encountered all three of them or two of them, like,
Dude,
and then
what if it
maybe,
was all three of them and then
right,
that was how they revealed Beatrix
right.
in season three?
Oh, that would have been so cool. But yeah, I thought about that. I was like, that seems very similar to that setup in season one.
No! Oh my
Oh, that
god.
would have been
A
so cool.
handwritten invitation. Oh my
Right?
gosh. Crazy.
Oh my gosh. Other theories. Oh yeah, I would assume that Silva would have become the headmaster. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know.
That's what I would assume too, because like it's at that point it's only him and Lunch Lady Doris.
And have we even seen Doris this season? I swear we didn't see her again.
No, she gone. She might even be gone. So yeah, it might just be Silva. He's gonna be like serving up sloppy joes in the lunch line and teaching magic and teaching combat like specialists. So it's like he's got his work cut out for him for sure.
What about Luna?
I think ooh, she would have taken credit for everything that happened at Althea for taking down the
Hmm.
Blood Witches. She would have been like, it was me that deployed the specialists and the fairies to work together and da 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 and whatever.
That's a hard one to think about, right? What would have
It
happened
is.
after everything that she did with like imprisoning Bloom and like,
Well, no one in the realm except for people at Althea knew that she imprisoned Bloom.
mhm.
So she probably would have, and now that Bloom's like gone missing, she probably would have like framed it as like Bloom being the savior of like and how like she knew that and she set her up to be that way and like all this stuff
Oh,
and like
okay.
even use it as good PR for Stella too of like how Stella helped for like mold Bloom during her time at Althea when she came and she didn't know she had powers and all that stuff like she would have like spun it. It would have been a PR spin for sure
For
for
sure.
or Queen Luna.
So it's
Yeah.
all about like appearances with her. Yeah. Oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I did take a look at some of the like I tried looking at like what I could read on the page, but I couldn't get like a 4K screenshot to like zoom in on the Blood Witch text. But I did notice that they used like I think it was Norse runes or something.
Incredible.
Yeah. And on the tower in the Realm of Darkness, I was able to decode two of the runes. I couldn't decode the middle one. I don't know if these like really had like a big symbolic meaning, but I mean they were there. So
Right.
like on one hand, like there was a rune that's like in the shape of like a crow's foot or like a raven's
Mm-hmm.
like claw, which is
Yeah.
interesting because
We
if we
hear the
think back to
ravens in the
like
background.
yeah, you
Yes.
hear the ravens in the background, and Bloom ran into the raven earlier in the season,
Oh,
before they went on the
yes.
jailbreak.
Yo, wait a minute. Yes. And it scared the
Yes.
crap out of her.
Mm-hmm. And it like
Oh
freaked
my
her out. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, there's some like cinematic foreshadowing going on here. Like they
God.
sprinkled in some levels to that. The raven's foot symbolizes the moment of birth or moment of death. It can also be a clear warning for people to not step further into wherever the domain is that it's posted up in. Let me see what else. Apparently, it has something to do with bridging the gap between the human and the divine. So it's important for those seeking answers and enlightenment. So, Bloom going and
Yo.
meeting her mom, it's really interesting because there's also a warning with it that should you cross beyond that point, for example, you shouldn't be pursuing egoistic goals because at that point, failure is pre-programmed into your fate. Yeah,
Wow.
really, really interesting. And it's about thinking about like the greater good as like oneself as like collective of like everything. And that's very Bloom in the end of the
Mm-hmm.
season too. So saving her world, as Miss Dowling said, rather than saving the world, like all the people around her, the people she cares about. Yeah, really, really a lot to think about. But the rune on the other side of the triangle is often used to like represent something that you have like planted and harvested in terms of like waiting for an eventual reward, waiting for seasons to come, even if there's a delay. And Bloom's mom has been waiting for 1,000 years to meet
Mm-hmm.
her. And Bloom's also been waiting 1,000 years to meet her mom. So like I'd say 16 years in terms of like the perspective. But
Right. Wow.
yeah. So just something to think about though, like these little runes that were up on the sign outside the Dark Tower.
That's insane. I can't believe you just like whipped that out. Like that's incredible. Like what, Dane? That's
Well, I think part of it is that I had been watching this rewatch so closely and noticing, like, once I realized that they really did implement a lot of foreshadowing and symbolism throughout, like, little things that we would see, it
Mhm.
kind of changed how I watched a lot of what
Mm.
was on screen. Everything means something. Like, if it's in the
Yeah.
shot, it's in the shot for a reason. So, yeah.
That's so good. I freaking love that.
But I think
Um,
that's what we would have seen, like Bloom reuniting with her mom and possibly
mhm.
getting answers, but also like, yeah,
Wow.
who knows?
I agree. I think that had this gone on for another season, we would have gotten a lot of answers. It would have been probably the final season if 2 wasn't the final season. And they would have brought in even more like nods to the original show and
Yeah,
stuff
I think so
that
too.
yeah, I think that that would have been just a treat, but alas, here we are at the end. Of course, every one of these titles for season 2 were a reference to a piece of literature or popular culture that references magic in some way. And so this title was All the Wild Witches, and it's actually references a line in a poem by W.B. Yeats titled Lines Written in Dejection, which I'm going to read that because I think that it's so interesting that they picked this for the last. Ooh, I think it's so cool that they picked this for the last title. So it's W.B. Yeats, if you don't know who that is, he is an Irish poet, which is so because they filmed it in Ireland, like it's so like all of it's so good. So it's a really short poem. It says, "When I have last looked on the round green eyes and the long wavering bodies of the dark leopards of the dark leopards of the moon, all the wild witches, those most noble ladies, for all their broomsticks and all their tears, their angry tears are gone. The holy centaurs of the hills are vanished. I have nothing but the embittered sun, banished heroic mother, moon, and vanished. And now that I have come to 50 years, I must endure the timid sun." So there's a lot there. But I think that it really does like encapsulate like what we experienced like as like especially like these like final moments of this episode. Like it's just like
Yeah.
every single part of like their like writing of the show, like even down to like what the title of the episode's like so intentional. And I really appreciate that.
Same. Like think about this poem over that last montage.
Mm-hmm.
Like it fits so
Mm-hmm.
well with like everything that we see. Like,
Yeah. All their
oh
tears,
wow.
their angry tears are gone.
I must endure the timid sun as she's like walking towards the tower too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a lot. It's really cool.
for real.
So, yeah. Well, final thoughts over like the whole season as we kind of come to a close of the last rewatch episode of this series is insane. But I don't know, like, what are your like final thoughts for just Winx and like Fate as a whole?
I think that this was such a cool experience to like not only go back and rewatch it with you, of course, that's like this has been so much fun, but like also the fact that like fate even happened because for years so many of us have asked Rainbow like, hey, we're not really enjoying the direction that you guys took with this series, and I think over the years fans have learned that it wasn't really in their entire control as to why
Mm-hmm.
certain choices were made for the animated series. A lot of it was like broadcasters and whatnot, so like I think it's nice that like they were like, we're going to try something different. Like, we're going to go back to the
Yeah.
roots of what we base this off of, like this mythology that's like always been in Winx Club, this Celtic otherworldly layer, as well as the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Winx is so teen drama inspired. Like,
Yeah.
bringing all of that to the surface for something like this, while it's not a live action Winx Club, it's very much the Winx saga. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's still Winx, it's just not like the Winx Club segment of the greater Winx umbrella, which I
Mm-hmm.
think I can kind of like see where they were going with that. And
You're saying all the words except for the Winx DNA, which I think is so funny. It
oh, that's
is.
the DNA. Like,
But yeah,
oh,
it has all of the components of a Winx Club story.
yeah, and
And I
more like things that we would have
exactly.
never had in like the classic Winx Club because it couldn't really exist in the animation medium, but can exist
Hmm.
in the live action medium.
I agree. And I
Yeah,
think I owe a lot to Fate the Winx Saga in kind of bringing me back into the fold of like being an active participant in the fandom in this way. I hadn't participated in like creating content or like doing anything really like this involved since probably like season 5, honestly, like before Fate dropped and we got the news that Fate was coming. And it only helped that it was so controversial and it
yeah,
caused so much buzz because of that controversy. Like it was exciting when it came out. It was so fresh and so new. And like, I just remember being so proud to be awake.
right. It was like I can't believe this is happening. Like this,
Mm-hmm. It's
it was
like
really
we made
surreal,
it.
right? We were out of like the dark ages of like whatever was going on with Nickelodeon Winx Club. And I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
say it like just because like I appreciate a Winx story for like a Winx story, but like at the same time, like I think a lot of us just could not see it as the same
Connect.
show. Yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
connect. It was
Yeah.
like
And
they had their own vision for it. So
totally. Yeah. And I think that we mentioned this like when we started this rewatch of season 2, like when you approach a story like this, you have to be all in, and not just from the people creating it too, like from the viewer side as well.
Yeah.
Like there's something to be said for a fandom such as Winx Club that we've stuck out through a lot. You know, we can handle a lot, and like it's so interesting to see a community that rallies around an IP like Winx Club, and for better or for worse, honestly. Like for me, Fate is like a very pillar moment in my time in the fandom of revisiting everything that made me love Winx Club in the first place and reconnecting with other people that feels the same way. Like it's just so
Yeah.
magical. And I'm really proud that I got to share this with so many of my Winx friends and you. And thank you for coming
Yes.
and doing all of this deep dive work. Oh my gosh,
Oh my
Dane.
gosh. Of course. Like, I think this experience too, like, you're maybe like one of, I think honestly, one of a few people that like appreciate Winx Club like for what it is as a whole, just Winx in general,
Mhm.
on the level that you do. And like I see it because like I do too. I love Winx. Like I just think it's such a magical universe. Like it makes you think about like life in just a different way. Like I don't even know how to like describe how I feel about Winx in its entirety, but
Yeah.
like I see what you see in a lot of this franchise, and I think it's like it's just one of the most magical. I think it is the most magical and inspiring story that like
Mhm.
has ever really resonated with me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I love
but
that.
yeah, and I'm so glad
It
that we got to do
yeah.
this.
I know, me too. This has been so fun. I couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. Such a journey that we've
Yeah,
been on together. It's been so much
for real.
fun. Oh my gosh. Well, tell our listeners where they can find you and stuff online.
At JustDaneDane on TikTok. I just started a Twitter account not too long ago. So I'm also on Twitter at JustDaneDane. And that's just where I'll ramble my thoughts on Fate or Winx or whatever.
And also join
So
us in the Winx Forever Podcast Discord. We are all the time talking about anything Winx
yeah,
in
whatever
there.
happens, you know.
Yeah, honestly. So yeah, come join us over there. But again, thank you so much for coming on this journey with Dan and I. It's been so much fun reliving this season finally after putting it off for so long because of how much it meant to so many of us Winx fans and Fate fans alike. So thank you guys, and thanks for listening to the Winx Forever podcast. I'm emotional. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, be sure to like or subscribe on your preferred streaming platform so that you're notified when new episodes are released. The theme for the Winx Forever podcast is the song She Makes Magic by Big Wild.